I found this overgrown entrance hidden in a forest while out on a hike, so I decided to climb down into it to explore.
Back in 2001, two young men decided to investigate the abandoned house. What they caught on tape remains one of the most controversial ghost sightings ever recorded.
I don't care how much you enjoy a good scare. These places are just not worth it. You would literally never catch me in any of these places. But if you must go, please just promise me you will never go alone. Starting off our list today, we have the infamous Mami Manor. This place is insane and definitely somewhere you should never go, let alone alone. The guy who runs it, Russ McCamey, is all kinds of messed up too. Mami Manor is a haunted house that opened up in San Diego in 2001. Well, I don't really know if haunted house is the right word because honestly, it's really more along the lines of a physical and psychological torture experience. The only way to visit is to join a Facebook group and then directly message the owner, Russ, who claims to have a waiting list for the attraction with thousands of names on it. The cost of entry? A donation of a bag of dog food, which honestly just makes this thing way more freaking creepy because it lets you know Russ isn't doing it for the money, but instead he actually gets off on the horror his patrons experience. In order to take part in the experience, you are required to sign a 40-page waiver and undergo a mental evaluation designed to determine your biggest fears. The experience takes place in Russ's personal home and can last up to 8 hours. And it can include waterboarding, physical violence, and force feeding. Many participants actually claim to have left with broken bones, cuts, and bruises. And apparently, Russ has forced illicit and hallucinogenic substances on his guests in order to make the experience all the more terrifying. Not only that, but some even claim to have undergone tooth extraction during their time in the manor. That is so gross, and obviously, many participants report having experienced extreme, severe, lasting trauma and PTSD after going to this place, which has since been relocated to Texas as of 2017. Do not go here. That's all I have to say. Alright, moving on from the hell that is Mami Manor to the gateway to hell, Stull Cemetery, located in Stull Village in Kansas. In the 1850s, a church was built on the grounds, and although the creators of it claim to have been Catholic, carved into the building's brick was the word witch, which is kind of contradictory. It is said that shortly after the church went up, a local woman participating in witchcraft and worshipping the devil conceived a son with none other than Satan himself. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess depends on how you look at it, their anti-miracle didn't last long, and the half-man, half-demon conception was buried under a tree in the church's cemetery, the same tree its mother used to take her own life shortly after the loss. It is believed that twice a year during the spring and winter equinox, Satan walks the ground to visit. And apparently it's not a far commute either, as the church is said to be a direct route to Down Under. No, not Australia, I'm talking about hell. Two very different places, unless you hate spiders, I suppose. For many years, satanic cults would gather in the church, often mutilating animals in the name of devil worship, until eventually the church burned down after a spontaneous fire broke out from the inside. Coincidence? I don't know. What's really strange though is that the wooden cross inside of the church was untouched by the flames. The place is so haunted with such an incredibly unholy past that during a trip to Colorado, the Pope actually instructed his pilot to fly around the entire state of Kansas rather than over it because he refused to fly over such unholy ground. There have also been many people who have died on the grounds over the years, and of course, as it is a cemetery, even more are buried there. And although the church was torn down by residents of the town in an effort to end the satanic worship and paranormal activity, the grounds to this day remain super haunted and incredibly disturbing. Next up, we have the Mansfield Reformatory, located in Mansfield, Ohio. If it looks familiar, that's probably because Shawshank Redemption was filmed on the grounds in 1994. But before it became a famous movie set, the Mansfield Reformatory was a penitentiary, and a pretty bad one too. The inmates were often kept in incredibly inhumane conditions, the jail was overcrowded, and the cells were small. Prisoners were cramped, overworked, and underfed. While this is already a major violation of human rights law, it actually gets worse. The medical care in the prison wasn't great. In fact, it was sadistic, and it wasn't actually medical care either. Prisoners who acted up would often be sent to doctors who had been given the green light to use experimental techniques on the inmates so that they would better comply with the guidelines of the corrupt prison. Some wardens even allowed these so-called doctors to torture the prisoners as well. So yeah, definitely not medical care, but that was the guise used by the reformatory. While the prison was operational, over 200 people died within its walls, and the building is now said to obviously be extremely haunted by those who suffered during the years between 1896 and 1990, when it finally closed its doors. This next one is for my Canadian friends, so sit back, grab yourself a Molson, and get ready to learn about Fairmont Banff Springs, located in Alberta. I mean, you might already be familiar with this hotel, but are you familiar with its dark and twisted history? Or the killings that have taken place within its walls? Or the fact that one room in the hotel, room 873, is so badly haunted that it had to be permanently closed off to the public. Like, sealed off. They didn't just put a deadbolt on the door, they paved over it. But even still, many guests have reported seeing the impression of a young woman appear on the wall where the door of room 837 used to be. The room is said to be haunted by the ghosts of a woman and her daughter who were killed in the suite many years ago. It is said that those who stay in the room next to 873 often hear loud banging coming from inside, along with other strange occurrences. In other areas of the hotel, guests have reported seeing a headless man and the ghost of a deceased bride who died in the hotel in 1920 after falling down a flight of stairs.
The ancient doorway to the Underworld. We're starting off with an area that was believed to be an entrance to the Underworld back in ancient times. The gateway was a cave that sat in the city of Hierapolis, which is now in modern-day Turkey. Here, rituals to the god Pluto, ruler of the Underworld, were practiced. Deadly fumes were emitted from the cave. Anything that went in never came out alive. Even birds flying overhead were said to plummet to their deaths. One ancient Greek philosopher named Strabo wrote, "The space is full of a vapor so misty and dense that one can scarcely see the ground. Any animal that passes inside meets instant death. I threw in sparrows, and they immediately breathed their last and fell." For a long time, historians believed that Pluto's gate was just a myth, a legend, at least the part about the cave being a deadly passage between worlds, but turns out that this place really does exist. In 2013, Italian archaeologists followed the route of a thermal spring and arrived at a cave in a town in southwestern Turkey, which is very much deadly. It emits high concentrations of carbon dioxide in the air, which can kill you if you're in one of the denser areas. And all that toxic air tends to pool towards the ground, which is why a lot of animals would die walking in here.
Next up on our list today, we have Hekla volcano, located in southern Iceland, and of course believed to be a gateway to hell. Hekla is an active volcano filled with fiery pools of lava that give it a dramatic fiery flare, but of course if that was all it took to be considered a gateway to hell, all active volcanoes would have made this list, but they don't. And that's because along with the fire and brimstone, sulfur and lava, there are also records kept by ancient monks that support the theory of this particular volcano being a gateway to the underworld. In their writings, monks claimed that the volcano was a doorway to the Inferno, as well as the eternal resting prison of Judas, who many believe, and the Pope's magistrate confirmed, is now trapped in hell. In its recorded lifetime, Hekla volcano has erupted more than 20 times, and on many occasions witnesses claim to have seen the souls of the damned soaring above the volcano as it spits out fiery lava, hot ash, and smoke.
Mount Osore is one of Japan's most sacred places. Osore-zen translates to Fear Mountain, and it's not hard to see how it gets its name. There's real beauty here, like in many parts of Japan, but the barren, volcanic landscape is definitely eerie. There's something about the place that just looks dead, and that's why the area was often compared to the Buddhist description of hell. This is also a place where the dead are said to be able to communicate with the living. Throughout Osozoran, you'll find numerous statues of Jizo, a guardian deity whose statues are often surrounded by piles of stones and pebbles. Parents of deceased young ones leave these stones as offerings to Jizo, hoping he will use them to help their loved ones reach paradise. Brightly colored toy windmills are another common sight left behind by grieving parents. There's also the annual Bodaji festival, where people looking to communicate with their deceased loved ones can speak with Itako, blind women who have undergone rigorous spiritual training to become mediums. They perform intense rituals for 3 months leading up to the festival and enter into deep trances in order to communicate with the dead during the event.
Next on our list, we have the Cape Matapan Caves located in Tainarum, Greece. The entrance to the caves rests on top of a cliff face and leads to a deep network of tunnels, many of which have not yet been explored, probably because of the fact that any living person would have needed to turn back long before reaching their destination of the Underworld. According to Greek mythology, however, there has been a successful attempt at finding Hades' underworld inside of the caves. It is believed that together Orpheus and Hercules braved the dark twists and turns of the cave in order to retrieve Eurydice, Orpheus's wife, from the depths of hell. If you are ever hanging out in Tainarum, Greece, and would like to attempt the journey yourself, which I highly recommend against, the entrance of the cave can be found next to the ruins of the Spartan temple, which are said to be sitting directly above the Grecian gates of hell.
Off to Indonesia now, we have Mount Merapi. Mount Merapi, translated to Fire Mountain, is one of the scariest volcanoes on Earth. This volcano is infamous for its frequent and deadly eruptions. The eruptions are no joke, spewing out hot gases, ash, and of course the star of the show, lava. A river of molten rock and toxic gas racing down the side of the mountain, destroying everything in its path. That's what locals are under constant threat of. One of the worst eruptions happened in 2010. It was an absolute nightmare. Over 350,000 people had to flee their homes, and 353 people lost their lives. Bodies were even found on the slopes of the volcano. There were, of course, also injuries, with people suffering severe burns. There were multiple eruptions that unleashed pyroclastic flows, which is this deadly mix of rock fragments, gas, and ash that travels rapidly, faster than a speeding car. These flows can incinerate anything and anyone caught in their path. Every couple years or so, there are small eruptions here, and around every 10 to 15, there are bigger ones. So living near this mountain is a bit of a gamble. The volcano's ash makes the soil great for farming, but the constant threat of eruptions means people have to be ready to evacuate their homes at a moment's notice.
Starting us off at number 10 is Printer's Alley. Back in the 18th century, Printer's Alley got its name for the many publishing companies and printing shops that operated within it. But while it was a straight and narrow place of business by day, at night it transformed into the men's quarters and served a very different crowd, offering men a night away from their wives. It was during this time that the Southern Turf building was managed by a man named Ice Johnson. But in 1914, when Prohibition hit, his once booming business of drinking, gambling, and lodging came to a crashing halt and was forced to close. This sent Johnson into a depressive spiral, and as legend has it, declaring that he would rather die than leave his home, Johnson took his own life in this very alley. Soon after, people began reporting seeing his apparition in the 3rd floor window, and to this day he remains a popular figure in the alley. Now the Tennessee Publishing Company, the ghost of Ice Johnson seeks out to terrify the employees, sometimes with small pranks like moving things from their desks or moving furniture before their eyes, but if you anger him, he may appear in a full-bodied apparition that will send you running for miles. Coming in at number 9 is Tennessee State Prison. Now, it probably doesn't come as a huge surprise that a prison is riddled with terrifying entities. However, the Tennessee State Prison is in a league of its own. The major reason being is that this correctional facility housed the electric chair for the state, and between 1916 to 1960, 125 prisoners met their fate by electrocution. However, it wasn't just those sentenced to death that are believed to haunt these halls. While the prison was still in operation, it was notorious for overcrowding, riots, and escapees, and it seems that many souls that died here are unable to escape its grasp. People that visit often report hearing strange sounds like the clanging of something along the bars, or hear footsteps approaching behind them, only to turn around and see that nothing is there. However, nothing is as bone-chilling as the screams from the electrocuted inmates that are said to echo throughout the abandoned building loud enough to make your ears ring. Coming in at number 8 is the Opryland Resort. Built in 1977, the Opryland Resort is considered one of Tennessee's most luxurious hotels. However, don't be fooled by the age of the building. It is said to be haunted by a myriad of horrifying entities, the most famous of which is the Lady in Black. One employee in particular had a haunting encounter several years back. He was managing a store that remained open until midnight, which was much later than most establishments. He usually left around 2 a.m. after stocking and getting things ready for the next day. But one particular night, as he was leaving, he saw what appeared to be a blurry woman standing at the top of a staircase dressed in customary Civil War attire. The man knew right away it was the apparition of a spirit and wanted to remain calm so as not to anger her. But when he went to go speak, she suddenly disappeared right before his very eyes. But that's not the worst of it. Another woman who stayed at the hotel when she was 9 recalls waking up precisely at 3 in the morning every night she was there. And each time she would open her eyes, the Lady in Black would be standing over her bed watching her sleep. And she wasn't alone. Many other residents claim to have been woken in the night by a woman whispering in their ear, or by hearing the blood-curdling screams of a woman in the night. So if I were you, I might look for a different place to stay. Next up at our number 7 spot is the Two Rivers Mansion. Built back in 1859, this mansion was once a part of a huge 1,000-acre plantation. And just like every plantation of the time, it has an extremely dark past. As the legend goes, during the mansion's construction, the remains of nearly 100 indigenous people were found along the property. However, despite realizing they had accidentally begun construction on a burial site, rather than burying the remains elsewhere, they decided to toss them in with the rest of the construction debris. However, as you can imagine, this angered the spirits to great lengths, and ever since that day they have haunted all who reside on the property. Staff and visitors alike claim to have witnessed sudden flickering of lights, strange orbs of light, doors mysteriously locking and unlocking on their own, or the sound of loud footsteps when no one else is around them. However, the entity that should really be feared is the Lady in Black, who can be seen gliding around the mansion or running through the acres surrounding the house, terrifying all that come face to face with her. Next up at number 6 is the Pam County Cemetery. Back in 1970, a group of developers began bulldozing the area along the Harpeth River to build some new housing. However, it wasn't until it was too late that they realized the land they had dug up included the Pam family cemetery. Now completely destroyed, they decided there'd be no harm in selling the dirt from the area, and eventually, over time, it ended up being spread across several of the nearby counties. However, to their shock, once the houses were finished being built a few years later, Harpeth River completely flooded and ruined every last one that resided on the previous cemetery grounds. And it wasn't just a one-time thing. Apparently, ever since, the area floods with alarming regularity, leading many to believe that the developers unwittingly released a curse on the land. But it's not just water that is causing an issue here. Apparently, there have been reported fires that reignite almost immediately after being extinguished, and residents of the area regularly report seeing tombstone apparitions materialize in their backyards. In fact, locals and tourists alike agree that there is often a bad energy in the air, which is often attributed to the angry spirits seeking revenge for their remains being disturbed many years ago. Starting us off at number 10 is Maple Hill Cemetery. Founded in 1822, this cemetery is the oldest and largest burial ground in the state, where roughly 80,000 people have been laid to rest. But with that many souls in one place, it only takes a matter of time before people start noticing something strange happening. While during the day, you may be spared from witnessing a horrifying spirit, it's said at night the tortured souls are unearthed, roaming the grounds in search of answers. hairdressers. Most unsettling is the park on the property, also known as the Dead Playground. Oh gee, that sounds inviting, don't you think? Apparently it's nicknamed that as many young people are buried in the area, and visitors brave enough to see for themselves what goes on claim that at night the trapped souls of the young can be seen playing around the park, while their creepy giggles echo throughout the grounds. But whatever you do, make sure you pay respect to Mary Bibb. If you knock on her mausoleum walls, she will reply with a gentle creak of her rocking chair buried inside, but if you forget to greet her, well, she just might haunt you forever. Coming in at number 9 is Fort Morgan. Said to be one of the most haunted places in all of Alabama, Fort Morgan is rife with ghoulish tales of ghosts and strange occurrences. The most notorious is that of a prisoner who's said to have died here in the early 1900s after he took his own life in the barracks. People say that if you walk past, you can still hear him crying out late at night, but he's not the only one you should fear. There's also a female spirit that wanders the grounds in search of justice after she too lost her life after being dragged into the fort and beaten to death by mysterious attackers who were never caught for the crime. Many believe she is an angry spirit with a vengeance who will torture any man who steps foot on the property. So if I were you, I'd skip this one. Next up at number 8 is Drish House. Once the home of Dr. John R. Marsh, a gambler and a drunk who built the estate in 1835 for his beloved bride Sarah. The couple lived in the home for 32 years until one day John had too much to drink for the last time and drunkenly tumbled over the stairway, falling to his demise. But you might be surprised that it's not his spirit that's trapped here, actually his wife Sarah. While no one knows for sure what keeps her soul trapped on the property, some say she was so traumatized after finding her husband dead in their home and wasn't able to recover. Others believe, however, that she refuses to leave because her family failed to honor her own funeral wishes, and so she remains, causing trouble to anyone who steps foot on the property to this day. While today the manor is used for many celebrations, Sarah remains, tormenting guests of the events, trying to get them to leave. If you're brave enough to visit, try looking up at the 3rd-story tower. It says you can catch a glimpse of her up there. Just be careful she doesn't see you looking, or she may just follow you around the property, terrorizing you until you leave. Next up at number 7, the Old Bryce Hospital. There are few places in this world more haunted than an old abandoned mental health facility, and there is no denying that the torment that went on here is a huge reason as to why so many spirits remain haunting its grounds, seeking revenge. Built during the segregation era of America, the building was branded as an insane asylum for those suffering from mental illnesses, when in reality it was pretty much a work camp for able-bodied black people who were admitted under false pretenses and then forced into slave labor, working in the fields around the hospital. Shockingly, the facility remained open until 1977 and only closed due to new desegregation laws. It comes as no surprise that after years of abuse and inhumane living conditions suffered by the so-called patients, that people claim to have had strange experiences while visiting. Those who've dared to visit the abandoned hospital claim the souls are angry, and that as soon as you walk in, you can feel the air shift. Many report hearing strange noises, and some even claim to have seen shadowy figures lurking around every corner. Next up at number 6 is St. James Hotel. For whatever reason, hotels tend to be a pretty big hotspot for paranormal encounters, and the St. James Hotel is definitely a part of that phenomenon. Back in the day it was the first hotel operated by a black congressman, and despite having many years of success, it hit hard times in the late 1800s and was eventually forced to close its doors to the public. Fast forward about 100 years to 1997 and the hotel reopened, but this time something was off about the building. Something just wasn't right. During its century-long time as an abandoned building, it became a horrifying hub for lost souls, and I guess they decided to remain, haunting all those that dare stay the night. Visitors claim seeing full-bodied apparitions sitting at the bar, or witness lights shutting off out of nowhere. But most creepy of all was a recorded visit when a psychic research team was brought in, and they walked the grounds asking if anyone was there, but they never heard a response back. But later on, when they played the tapes, an older man's voice responded saying, "Well, that's a stupid question," making everyone in the room jump. So, what do you say? Are you brave enough to pay the ghosts a visit? Coming in at
the Haunted Shop Ledger. A family in Kent donated this haunted book to Brighton's most haunted house, Preston Manor, in 2015. The ledger, which dates from the First World War, was discovered bricked up in a shop wall in Brighton by a worker when he was demolishing the building in 1988. He took the ledger home, and soon after, he and his daughter began experiencing visions of men, women, and children, and a soldier with a horse. The daughter was told by one of the spirits that the book must be returned to Brighton for the centenary of its first entry in December 1915. The terrified family then delivered it to Preston Manor, which has its fair share of ghosts and reputation for spectral activity and unexplained phenomena dating back to its days as a private home in the early Victorian period. Now, a medium visiting the house inspected the book and confirmed that they could sense bad things emanating from it. Yeah, I think it's a good idea that the family gave it to someone else. 9. The Iceman. The mummy of Otzi, aka the Iceman, was found in 1991. It is believed that the Iceman belonged to 3000 BCE, and his body was preserved because of the glacier that surrounded him after he died. The cause of death remained uncertain until 10 years after the discovery of the body. It was initially believed that Otzi died from the exposure during a winter storm, and later it was speculated that he may have been a victim of a ritual sacrifice. However, soon after his discovery, people who were involved with his discovery began to die due to violent accidents. Forensic paleontologist Rainer Henn died in a horrific car accident, mountaineer Kurtz Fritz died in an avalanche, and hiker Helmut Simon died after falling off a dangerous hidden path. The Iceman then claimed 3 more lives in quick succession between 2004 and 2005. It's thought that anyone who comes into contact with the Iceman will die, and people believe that the discovery of the Iceman has released a curse and that it has the power to destroy mankind. So why they would put this out for people to see, I have no clue. Number 8. The Hope Diamond. The Hope Diamond is currently sitting in the Smithsonian Institute. It is 45.52 carats, is a dark grayish blue color, and the pendant surrounding the Hope Diamond contains 16 white diamonds, and the necklace chain it's on also contains 45 white diamonds. Yeah. That is a lot. Now, French monarchs, an heiress, and at least one unlucky postman have met their misfortune after possessing it. The diamond gets its name from its London banker Henry T. Hope, who purchased it in 1839. After Hope's death, the diamond passed through the hands of various owners. It was believed that the diamond was lost in a shipwreck, but it then appeared at a public auction in Paris on June 29, 1909. Evelyn Walsh McLean, a Washington, D.C. socialite and wife of the former owner of the Washington Post, acquired the diamond in 1911 for $180,000. She too suffered the curse of the diamond as her husband died in a mental institution, her eldest son died in a car accident, and her daughter took too many sleeping pills. She believed in the curse, but she continued to wear the diamond and would not sell it for fear of bringing bad luck to someone else, which is really considerate if you think about it. Now, after Evelyn's death in 1947, the diamond was found, along with $4 million worth of other jewels, stored in shoeboxes in her bedroom. Then, Henry Harry Winston, a leading American jeweler and gem dealer, bought the diamond from her estate in 1949, and in 1958, he donated the diamond to the Smithsonian Institute, where it is today. Number 7. Robert the Doll. In 1904, Robert the Doll was given to 4-year-old Robert Eugene Otto, who went by Jean. Now, some reports say it was a present from Jean's grandfather, while others suggest a disgruntled maid of the Ottos cursed the doll before giving it to their young son, and it's also possible that the maid cursed the doll sometime after Jean's grandfather gave it to him. Either way, this doll was bad news. Robert the Doll, dressed in a sailor suit of Jean's, quickly became his owner's evil alter ego. As legend would have it, whenever Jean's parents would find his bedroom furniture upended or his toys mangled, Jean would say, "Robert did it." Now, Jean grew up to become an artist, got married, and then returned to his childhood house. Jean set up a new area for Robert in the attic, and passerbys claimed that Robert would switch positions without any help and watch them from the window while they walked by, before handing Robert over to the Fort East Martello Museum. Now, according to local folklore, the doll has caused car accidents, broken bones, job loss, divorce, and a cornucopia of other misfortunes. And museum visitors supposedly experience post-visit misfortunes for failing to respect Robert. 6. The Louvre. Yep, you heard it here first. It appears that the whole Louvre is haunted. Long before the Louvre was a museum, it was a fortress dating back to the 12th century, so there's no doubt that there's some paranormal activity there. Now, the Louvre's most infamous apparition is a butcher by trade. He became a favorite henchman of Queen Catherine de Medici in the 16th century. Now, suspecting he knew one too many secrets about the royal family, the cunning queen planned his death. It is said that from beyond the grave, Jack returned to haunt the royal family, living in the palaces of the Louvre. Nicknamed the Red Man of the Tuileries, he can still be spotted dressed in red, moving about the museum and the nearby gardens. Now, Napoleon claimed to have seen his likeness in 1815.
Bury Pomoy Castle in Devon, England has a history going back to the 15th century. It was originally built by the Pomoy family, who owned the land for 400 years before falling on hard times. The castle was sold to the Seymours, a noble family linked with the Tudor royalty, and over time the castle underwent several renovations and expansions. And as beautiful as it looks, even today being mostly in ruins, it's also become known for its ghost stories. The Seymours abandoned the castle in the late 17th century, and stories of strange things happening on the land started becoming pretty common. One well-known legend is about the White Lady, believed to be the spirit of Margaret Pomeroy. According to the story, Margaret was imprisoned by her envious sister and then left to die from starvation in the dungeons. Another ghostly presence is the Blue Lady, thought to be the Lady Eleanor Seymour. The story goes that she fell to her death from a tower in the castle, and her spirit has been trapped in the decaying castle ruins ever since, attracting men to dangerous areas of the castle, especially the tower, where they just might also fall to their deaths.
Leap Castle has quite the sordid history, so it's no wonder that this place is considered to be incredibly dark, eerie, and unsettling. The castle was built sometime between the 13th and 15th century in Ireland by the O'Bannon clan. One evening, during a particularly eventful dinner, a large number of the O'Bannon clan perished after eating food poisoned by an opposing clan, the O'Carroll clan, with whom they had been in a long-standing power struggle. But of course, it doesn't end there, because the conflict surrounding the O'Bannon clan was not only reserved for outside foes. In fact, one of the greatest acts of violence occurred inside the castle's chapel, and it actually involved two of the O'Bannon brothers, a hothead and a priest. Figure out a joke about that. One day during mass, one of the O'Bannon brothers stormed into the chapel and plunged a sword into the heart of his brother, the priest. The gruesome event is what led to the chapel being known as the Bloody Chapel, but of course, it gets worse, because during a renovation of that very same chapel in the 1900s, workmen found something truly barbaric. A secret dungeon hidden underneath the chapel. As it turns out, the holy place of worship had actually been equipped with a trap door, which opened to reveal a pit filled with sharp wooden spikes, which would have punctured the lungs, hearts, and other organs of anyone unlucky enough to have fallen down the shaft. Now, if you're worried about how often this barbaric method of disposing of enemies and traitors was used inside the sanctity of the church, worry no further, because the answer is a lot. In fact, it was used so often that during the renovation, workers had to haul at least 3 cartloads of skeletons from the dungeon before they were able to continue on with their renovations. Talk about a dark secret.
Tberry Castle in Staffordshire, England dates back to the 11th century. It was originally built by the Normans and has been expanded and modified over the centuries. The castle hosted some pretty big names over the years, including Mary, Queen of Scots, who unfortunately didn't really enjoy her time there, seeing as she was imprisoned. On top of that, she complained that the place was damp, and I feel like most old castles must have been damp, so that's really saying something. Unlucky for her, she seems to be trapped in the castle, or at least what remains of it to this day as well. The castle fell into disrepair after it was mostly destroyed during the Civil War in the 17th century and was eventually abandoned. And today the ruins are known for being haunted. One of the most famous ghosts said to stalk the land is Mary, Queen of Scots. People say they've seen a ghostly figure wandering the grounds, especially in the area where she was held captive. Another ghostly figure worth mentioning is that of a woman who is believed to be Lady Elizabeth. Legend has it that Lady Elizabeth was the wife of a castle resident who was betrayed by her own family. She's said to roam the castle, her spirit restless and searching for closure.
Musham Castle, located in the Lungau region of Salzburg, Austria, was built in 1191 AD, and its past has left a pretty big stain on the present. The castle is most known for serving as the administrative center during the Zauberer Jackal witch trials, which took place between 1657 and 1690 and led to the execution of 139 people, most of which were actually surprisingly male. The executions were drawn out and incredibly dark, with victims being tormented, burned, buried alive, and decapitated. In some instances, the accused, while still alive, would also have had their hands cut off and branded by burning iron. Today, the castle is said to be, understandably, extremely haunted, with many who enter reporting being encompassed by a haunting aura and an eerie ambiance. It seems as though those who were killed under false accusation are intent on not becoming quickly forgotten to those brave enough to tread down the harrowed halls of the Musham Castle. And I don't blame them, and I'd be pretty pissed too.
Edinburgh Castle may be the most famous castle in all of Scotland. It stands on Castle Rock, which has been occupied by humans since the Iron Age, at the very least. So there's a lot of history, not only in this castle, but on the land it sits on, and that means a lot of ghosts. One of the most tragic ghosts said to haunt the castle is a mysterious noblewoman from the 16th century. People have reported seeing her wandering through the older parts of the castle, sometimes quietly weeping. Many believe she could be Janet Douglas, Lady Glamis. She was accused of treason by King James V, a charge everyone knew was false, but even though she was innocent, she was burned at the stake right outside the castle on July 17th, 1537, right in front of her young son. So yeah, no wonder she's bummed out all the time. I mean, imagine being burned alive in July. It's already hot and now you're on fire. Another ghost might provide a little more laughs though. He smells like crap, literally. According to the legend, he was one of the unfortunate souls locked away in the castle's filthy, rat-infested dungeons, and one day he attempted to escape by hiding in a wheelbarrow full of dung. He was hoping to be carted out and then dumped somewhere where he could get up, shake all the poo off himself, and then run off into the hills in search of a nice bath, I guess. But instead, the wheelbarrow was just tipped over the castle's battlements, and he fell to his death onto the sharp rocks below. Talk about unlucky.
Chateau de Chion is a medieval castle built in the 11th century located on Lake Geneva between France and Switzerland. Much like the other castles on this list, its history is pretty dark. You see, in 1861 a prison was constructed on the castle grounds, and from there, it got really bad. Many people were jailed at the Chateau de Chion for various reasons. Some people were locked up because of their political or religious views, and others were kept there as hostages or because they were believed to be witches. Inmates were tormented, burned, and killed by the hundreds, and some people were also drowned in the water surrounding the castle. So if you think you're safe from the darkness of the grounds by wading in the waters of the lake, think again. Today, the Chateau de Chion stands as one of the most well-preserved medieval castles in all of Europe, and after having abandoned its dark and twisted ways, it is an incredibly popular tourist stop along Lake Geneva.
We're starting off the list with North Yungas Road, also known as Death Road in Bolivia. Why would you ever choose to drive on a road with a nickname like that? Well, for me, it would depend on how it got that name. Is there a ghost story associated with the road? If so, sure, I'll check it out. I like a spooky good time. Or is it a road where countless people have died because it's incredibly dangerous? Yeah, I'll probably pass in that case. But a lot of other folks wouldn't. Death Road draws about 25,000 tourists per year. This road, known for its narrow and winding paths, was once dubbed the world's most dangerous road. And it's easy to see why, especially with the internet, because you don't even need to go to Bolivia to check it out. The road is narrow for starters, and it has a steep drop off. And by steep, I mean like completely vertical. And there's no guardrail, so you're falling 2,000 feet to your doom if you mess up. There's also a lot of sharp curves in the road, seeing as it's winding around a mountainside, so collisions are also common. Unless you're an ace behind the wheel with nerves of steel, this is probably not a place you'd want to throw on your bucket list. Alright, so what if driving ain't your thing but you still like heights? Well, try El Caminito del Rey in Spain. This is a narrow walkway attached to the side of a cliff in the El Chorro Gorge. It was previously known as as one of the most dangerous hiking trails. Just looking at pictures of people doing this makes my palms sweat. I'm not a heights guy. I don't get skydiving, bungee jumping, doing pull-ups on cranes, this. I like my feet firmly planted on the ground, so this would suck. But once again, this is a big tourist attraction, so more power to you if this looks fun to you. The walkway was constructed in the early 20th century, but eventually fell into disrepair. There were 5 deaths on the walkway in 1999 and 2000 alone. The walkway was closed for nearly 10 years until reopening in 2015. And at number 8, we have Mount Hua Shan Plank Walk in China. Walking the plank. That's something I'd never want to do either. I'd definitely take a cruise on a pirate ship and watch someone else do it though. This sadly has nothing to do with pirates though. This is a treacherous mountain trail with narrow pathways and steep cliffs. As for the plank walk part, well, part of this little adventure involves walking on wooden planks bolted to the mountainside. Once again, mom's spaghetti all over my sweater. Not only is this plank walk super high, but these planks do not look trustworthy. They look like they were like stapled together, and there's only enough width for like half a person to comfortably walk. You gotta like really narrow your stride. Now sure, you do have a harness, but there's videos I've seen online, there's not much security and the harness can easily just be like unclipped. There's videos online of people just free walking this thing. Yeah, makes me shudder. Number 7, the Cliffs of Moher. We're taking a trip over to Ireland now to observe these beautiful cliffs. Now, don't get me wrong, they're stunning. A real postcard moment. I can't deny the allure of these sheer limestone cliffs plunging dramatically into the ocean. Hordes of selfie sticks descend on the land. It's like the red carpet of cliffs, only with a lot more wind. And that's where the danger comes in. That and the lack of guardrails. It's just you, the wind, and a sheer drop into the rocky waters below. One strong gust, and suddenly you're starring in someone's very disturbing vacation footage. Now, I get it. Living on the edge, it can be exhilarating. But the Irish weather is not the most predictable either. One moment it can be all sunshine and rainbows, and the next, heavy rain, wind, wet, slip, goodbye. Next up we have Table Mountain in South Africa. This is known as one of the country's most dangerous hiking locations, so naturally everyone wants to go. Obviously it's not just the danger aspect that makes it alluring, it's beautiful. You get a nice panoramic view of Cape Town. It has this flat summit-like tabletop, and there's a ton of plant and animal life to check out. But hiking and climbing can be risky here because of rapidly changing weather conditions and steep cliffs, especially on the harder trails. The mountain offers a variety of hiking trails, each catering to different skill levels, but even the more accessible routes can pose challenges. The weather on the mountain is notoriously unpredictable, and conditions can shift on a dime. Fog and strong winds are frequent, turning a tranquil hike into a more formidable one. One of the most popular routes is Platyclip Gorge, a direct but strenuous climb. As you ascend, the views of Cape Town and the surrounding ocean become increasingly captivating, but the weather can transform drastically on your way up. It's not uncommon to start your journey in clear skies and find yourself engulfed in mist as you reach the summit. And we're starting off the list with La Noria in Chile. La Noria was a town located in the barren desert of Atacama. That's right, we have a ghost town on here, folks. A destination for ghost hunters and paranormal enthusiasts from across the world. Maybe some of you are one of them. It used to be a mining town in the 1800s, but by the early 1900s, most of the residents had packed up and left, leaving their now crumbling homes and buildings behind. Now, the people who lived there led tough lives. They worked constantly, the climate was harsh, many of them died suddenly, and life expectancy was not high. This is perhaps why the cemetery is said to be the most haunted part of the abandoned town. I guess cemeteries are pretty much the most haunted places anywhere you go, though, to be fair. Visiting there now, you'll see many coffins just out in the open, with skeletons just sitting there for you to see, bones scatter the area, and this is because there was a lot of looting in the area after the town was abandoned, and some say that at night the souls of the deceased, angered by the tampering of their graves, rise from their graves. Yeah, I gotta go there. Just the 112th place I have on my list since I started making these videos. Next up we have the Vampire of Pisco. Now, looking at images of this Peruvian town, I just gotta start by saying, looks lovely. I would definitely visit, but just be warned, you could run into the ghost of a vampire lady if you're not careful. So So our story actually begins in England in 1913, where a woman named Sarah Ellen Roberts had been executed for being a witch. Some say she had even been bitten by Dracula himself and was one of his wives, a vampire witch. That's one dangerous woman. Right before her death, she warned that she would return from her grave in 80 years to exact vengeance. The Church of England believed her corpse to be too cursed to bury on holy ground, so her actual husband, not Dracula, sadly, a man by the name of John Roberts, probably the most average, uninteresting, basic name possible, decided to take her body elsewhere. And John traveled all across Europe. No one would have her. He tried Chile, Argentina, with no luck until his quest eventually landed him in Piso, Peru, where he finally lay her to rest. In 2007, there was a massive earthquake in the town, and one of the few tombs left untouched, Sarah Ellen Roberts. A number of Pisco residents say that on some nights you can still see a ghostly woman wandering the streets. Number 8, the Encantado. The mythical creature is said to stalk the forests of the Amazon, residing in the river. But sometimes they come out at night, often shape-shifting into human form. Their real form is that of a serpent or dolphin-like appearance. They're very attracted to parties or social gatherings, especially if there's music. The Encantado are said to be exceptional musicians in human form, hypnotizing their victims with their musical abilities. Once it has its target in its grasp, it whisks them away, dragging them into the waters of the Amazon, never to be seen or heard from again. If it doesn't decide to take them away, though, these creatures are also known to incite madness or cause illness and death to their victims. So, if you do decide to visit the Amazon and cruise down the majestic river, just be cautious if you happen to come across a beautiful stranger in the dead of night with incredible musical talent. Next on the list, we have the Recoleta Cemetery in Argentina. This Buenos Aires cemetery has quite the storied history, with several notable Argentines having been buried there. One of the more harrowing tales of Rufina Cambaceres, who met a gruesome end at the cemetery. Honestly, this is one of my absolute worst fears. Rufina had a privileged life. She was born into a wealthy family. She was popular. She really lived it up. But unfortunately, it was short-lived. In 1902, she suddenly collapsed and was pronounced dead at only 19 years of age. She was placed in a coffin, and she was sealed at a mausoleum at this cemetery. But just a few days after her funeral, a graveyard worker was in her crypt and noticed that her coffin was slightly ajar. And as to why he was in the crypt, I don't really know. I don't know what crypt keepers do. I tried to look it up. All I got were descriptions of the 90s Crypt Keeper series. Great show, but not really what I'm looking for, so let me know in the comments if you know. Anyway, the man opened her coffin and to his horror saw that there were scratch marks on it. Rufina had been buried alive, essentially. Some say that her shadowy figure still roams through this cemetery at night. Number 6, the Rosario Mine. This mine, located in the Cerro Rico mountain in Potosi, Bolivia, is exceptionally dangerous. For centuries, miners have descended into the bowels of the earth, braving treacherous conditions in search of silver and other valuable minerals. The working environment is pretty harsh, with cramped and unstable tunnels, limited ventilation, and this constant threat of collapse. Miners work long hours, physically demanding labor, often exposed to harmful dust and toxic fumes, leading to health issues and a shortened life expectancy if they don't die in the mine. Over the centuries, millions of miners have met their end here, but despite all that, the nature of the job continues today, and with all the deaths that have taken place there, it's no surprise that many of the miners believe it to be haunted by the spirits of those who perished in its depths. And many of them claim to have experienced eerie and unexplainable phenomenon within the dark confines of this mine. Miners often pay homage to El Tío, the god of the underworld, whose altar sits at the entrance to the mine. Miners offer cigarettes, alcohol, cocoa leaves to El Tío in hopes of receiving protection and good fortune.
Starting us off at number 10, the Old Red Field Road. Said to be extremely active with spirits, keep your eyes peeled if you ever find yourself driving down this road. Those that try find that their flashlights and radios suddenly stop working, and some even say their cars begin acting up as soon as they start to approach. One driver in fact said that the hood of their car flew open on site, and when they went to go and check it out, there was no explanation for why it would have done that. Visitors claim that countless ghosts roam the road, walking up and down, likely coming from the nearby cemetery, and that they feel a sense of deep, unsettling anxiety until they turn off the Old Red Medfield Road. So maybe if you do visit, just find an alternate route. Next up at number 9, Cotter Bridge. Located in a small town of less than 900 people, during the day the bridge is a world-renowned hotspot for trout fishing, visited by residents and tourists alike. But things take a turn after the sun goes down, and locals say that this bridge is haunted by some truly terrifying spirits. Residents say that at night you can hear the cries of an infant coming from the bridge and the sounds of young people playing for hours and hours. But most haunting of all is the woman who can be seen sprinting from vicious hounds. No one knows who she is or why she's being chased, but the fear of her screaming voice has scared residents from ever daring to get too close. Coming in at number 8, Fort Smith Courthouse. During the late 19th century, Fort Smith was the site of many sentenced to be hanged. In fact, it was rather notorious for it, as the presiding judge at the time, named Isaac C. Parker, got the nickname the Hanging Judge from sentencing a whopping 160 people to their death, 79 of which received the punishment. The hangings happened outside the courthouse in the gallows, perhaps as a warning sign for all to see what happened to criminals. And it's believed the condemned men of the jail still roam the grounds seeking revenge on Isaac Parker. Many today say they've had frightening experiences while at the courthouse, especially in the gallows. Visitors claim to have heard gavels banging, seen ropes swinging when there was no wind, and one groundskeeper even claims to have spoken with the ghost of Isaac Parker himself. Next up at number 7, the Clayton House. Originally built in the 1800s as a Civil War hospital, it wasn't until 1882 when William Clayton moved his family into the now historical home. The family seemed to have a fairly happy life in their home, but I guess with roots as a hospital, ghosts flock to it and continue to haunt it to this day. The former director of the site, Martha, says that as soon as she started working there, she knew something was off. Doors would slam in the middle of the night, she would hear footsteps from down the hall when no one was there, and one room on the second floor would always sound like music was playing from inside. Then in 2008, a carpenter who was doing some repairs on the building took pictures to keep track of the progress, but when those photos got developed, he saw a woman dressed in brown lurking in the back of one of his photos. And he wasn't the only one to claim to have seen her lurking in the corners. After a while, Clayton's house had kind of a reputation, and so paranormal investigators started visiting. And using EVPs, they got recordings of a man shouting obscenities at someone named Anna, which piqued their interest as one of Clayton's daughters was named Anne. But maybe most terrifying was one woman who says that she was standing by herself in the hotel when her hair was tugged hard. She turned around to see who had snuck up on her, assuming it was a prank, but no one was around and she was all alone. Next up at number 6, the Toltec Mounds. A hiking trail might not be the first place you'd expect to be terrifyingly haunted, but it makes much more sense once you know that it leads through the remains of an ancient civilization. More officially referred to as the Plum Bayou Mounds, there were once home to a large group of people beginning around 600 AD. But what no one has been able to figure out since is their sudden and mysterious disappearance in 1050 AD. It's thought that the mounds were used for a variety of different purposes, but we know for sure that at least one was a burial ground, and as you can imagine, that is where most of the ghost sightings have occurred. Visitors who pass through the trail say they've seen strange apparitions of what looked like ancient people, along with mysterious orbs of light popping out of nowhere, and some say that if you walk by at night, you'll hear footsteps of the ancient civilization that will send you running as far away as you can.
Number 10. Captain Cook Hotel. The Captain Cook Hotel, of course located in Anchorage, Alaska, is said to be haunted by the ghost of one John Jack Sturgis, who is a former chef at the hotel who died in a fire back in 1986. What a start to a list already. We're just in the ghost depths already. Guests and staff alike have reported various paranormal experiences such as unexplained voices, cold spots, and the sound of footsteps in empty hallways, which I don't know, all signs point to ghosts when you put those in a row. Some guests have even reported seeing the apparition of a man in a chef's uniform. I'm not trying to laugh. That's just, imagine that, you know what I mean? 4 a.m. in the middle of the night. You're like, chef, may I? Can you turn off the light? Thanks. Like a ghost wearing a chef's hat. It's like, that's only funny. That is an only funny thing. That is from Luigi's Mansion. He's just smacking the spatula all night looking at you. He's like, how do you like your eggs? I'm like, that's so scary. Despite these reports, the hotel remains a popular destination for visitors to Anchorage who are drawn to its unique haunted history. Apparently people want to see a ghost wearing a chef's hat. Honestly, now that I'm talking about it, I kind of want to see that too. But, you know, knock on wood. Number 9, the Golden North Hotel. The Golden North Hotel sounds like a Game of Thrones classic. There have been reports of paranormal activity on the 3rd floor of the Golden North Hotel in Skagway, Alaska. I like when it's specific, when it has a certain floor or certain room. That's how you know it's legit. Guests and staff have reported hearing strange noises, seeing apparitions, and feeling unexplained cold spots on the floor. I guess they're walking around with bare feet. Bare feet in a hotel? That's brave. Some have even claimed to have encountered the ghost of a former employee named Mary, who is said to haunt the hotel. All these ghosts that are haunting their past work establishments. If I die, I'm gonna haunt this place for sure. While the hotel embraces its haunted history and offers guided ghost tours for visitors, which is an odd flex, it's worth noting that paranormal experiences are subjective and not everybody may have the same encounter, okay? So, what's fun to some is haunting to others, so tread carefully in the ghost world. Don't make fun of people online, you know? Some are really afraid of ghosts with chef hats, so. Number 8, Gacona Lodge and Trading Post. There are reports and stories about Gacona Lodge and trading posts being haunted. There's a lot online. This is probably a very real one. Some visitors and staff have claimed to have experienced unusual occurrences and paranormal activity at this lodge, which was supposed to be a winter getaway, but now it's just a Stanley Kubrick classic. According to the stories, the ghost of a woman dressed in 1800s style clothing has been seen walking, or floating rather, through the lodge. And strange noises and footsteps have been heard in empty rooms. It's always an old-fashioned ghost too. It's never a ghost wearing a polo. You ever notice that? It's always like an old Victorian woman. Like why? Why can't we have a newer ghost? Slim pickings on the attire in heaven, I guess. Must be. They're like, hey, we have an old saggy robe and that's about it. Here you go. Go haunt a hotel. There have also been reports of objects moving on their own, doors opening and closing by themselves, and again, cold spots in certain areas on the floor, which, I don't know, it could be lousy heating, really, if you ask me. It's Alaska, right? Number 7, Westmark Fairbanks Hotel. There have been numerous reports of paranormal activity in room 277 of the Westmark Fairbanks Hotel in Alaska. Again, I like when it's a specific room. That for me seals the deal. It's like 1408. I'm in. I'm locked in. Now I'm a believer. It's so eerie. The room is said to have been haunted by the ghost of a woman who allegedly took her own life there many years ago, which is sad and terrifying. Guests who have also stayed in that room have reported feeling uneasy, or, my personal nightmare, they feel as if they're being watched all night. Yeah, just eyes in a painting, watching you, I guess. Sometimes they even hear strange noises or voices and seeing unexplained movements of objects. Those classic 3 ghost things. Some guests have also claimed to have seen the ghostly figure of a woman in the room or in the hallway. So that's good. This one really hits all the marks. 5 stars for paranormal activity, really. Number 6, the Hilton Anchorage Hotel. Guests and staff members have both reported seeing apparitions, hearing strange noises, and experiencing other unusual phenomenon in various parts of the hotel. Phenomenon? I always add the N there. I'm not sure which one it is. One of the most commonly reported haunted areas of this hotel is said to be the 3rd floor, particularly rooms 309 and 317. 2 for 1 package. It's the north and south sides are haunted, but everything in the middle, yeah, you're good. Just don't explore. Guests who have stayed in these rooms have both reported seeing ghostly apparitions and experiencing other strange occurrences, like lights turning on and off by themselves, and the feeling of being touched by an unseen presence. What a terrible, annoying ghost. I think I would rather see a ghost than have them with the lights all night long. You know what I mean? How annoying is that? You have to get out of your bed and keep shutting it off. That's the worst. That's worse than just being haunted, really. It is a Hilton, so it's probably at least a decent sleep, you know? They're good over there. They got a good, nice breakfast setup in the morning. It's all about the departure the next day. That's all it is for hotels. You could have ghosts all night, lights flickering, but you have a juice bar the next morning? I'll forget about the whole ordeal. We're good, 5 stars. I'm coming back. Number 5, the Van Gilder Hotel. Located in Seward, Alaska, the Van Gilder Hotel, I mean, first of all, this thing is tiny. It looks like a joke. It looks like a cartoon police station. How is this place haunted? It looks like a place Wreck-It Ralph would have a field day with. Small but mighty, I guess. The hotel, which was built in 1916, has a long history of ghosts and ghouls. Numerous reports of paranormal activity over the years. One of the most commonly reported haunted areas is the room 202, where guests have reported unexplained movements of objects and again, the feeling of being watched, which is so scary. I don't like that. It's the worst. There have also been reports of ghostly apparitions in other parts of the hotel, including the lobby and the stairwell. The lobby, these ghosts are getting brave. I mean, not even letting us check in and you're already moving shit around trying to scare us. That's very brave. Okay, you're excited. We get it. The most famous ghost associated with the Van Gilder Hotel is that of a woman named Fanny Guthrie Bame, who apparently died in the hotel back in the 1950s. Guests have reported seeing Fanny's ghostly figure on the 2nd floor. That's where she allegedly fell to her death from the balcony, which is so sad. If I didn't see that again though, as a ghost, I'd be like, oh, this is a terrible TikTok loop scenario. Number 4, Inlet Tower Hotel and Suites. Okay, this one is very large, and it looks very haunted, okay? It doesn't look like a mini police station. This one's very Kubrick. This hotel, which was built in 1952, it already has a long history. It's seen a few deaths in its rooms, and of course, to follow, there have been numerous reports of ghostly apparitions over the years. Apparitions, I'm mixing it up now, I'm just saying random words. One of the most commonly reported haunted areas of the hotel is the 15th floor, way high up in here. This is haunted, where guests have heard strange moaning noises. It's kind of funny. That's terrifying, don't get me wrong, but like, that's kind of like, okay, who's doing that? Which room is that coming from, you know? Feeling cold spots and seeing ghostly figures walk around the hallways at night. It's your classic haunted hotel. The most famous ghost associated with the Inlet Tower Hotel is that of a woman who allegedly jumped to her death from the 15th floor. That is really high up. That's so sad. Guests have reported seeing her ghostly figure on the 15th floor, as well as in the hotel's elevator, which is better. That's definitely a step. As long as she's in the elevator this time around, we're good. Keep her in there, not outside on the scary balcony. Inside where it's safe. Number 3, the Fairbanks Memorial Hospital. A haunted hospital. Nice. I couldn't imagine a more vulnerable place to see a ghostly figure. Excuse me, can I get some more jello? Lights are flickering, some chicks floating. You're like, I'm gonna check out. The Fairbanks Memorial Hospital in Alaska. I mean, the hospital, first of all, it was built in 1972, and it has a long history of, well, hospital stuff. A lot of deaths, also a lot of new life. So silver lining, I guess. That's a good thing. One of the most commonly reported areas is the intensive care unit, the ICU. That's what the ghosts say. They say, hey, I see you right there. I'll watch you all night. Both staff members and patients have reported hearing voices, feeling someone touch them who wasn't actually there, and seeing ghosts of past patients walk around the halls at night. That's the scariest thing I've ever heard of. Past patients, just like. Visitors and staff members have reported seeing a ghostly figure, like a very specific ghostly figure in the ICU, as well as other parts of the hospital. So, could be a past nurse, could be someone who used to work there, maybe someone who was killed while they were building it. I don't know. It's a good ghost. It's a hospital good ghost. That's one you maybe don't mind bumping into at night. Number 2. Ice worms. Yeah, need I say more ice worms, I guess. That's a terrifying thing to look at now that you're in Alaska. I'm dodging these suckers all spring. Now I gotta worry about winter too? God, I hate worms. I'm Canadian. We don't need any ice worms, okay? We're all set. The only time a worm ever lives life in a glacial ice form is in Alaska. How impressive is that? One and only place you'll find ice worms. All your life you see worms shrivel up and then fade away on the sidewalk, but I've never ever seen one near ice. They're supposed to run out of fuel and then die off, but ice worms, these things just keep going. They get stronger. Should that icy temperature rise, however, above freezing, well, that's when these worms die off. It's the way we see worms go normally. They shrivel up and, you know, go, ugh. They get stronger the longer that they wait and plan. Honestly, these worms are kind of cool. If you're ever in Alaska and you see ice worms, comment down below. These are like Captain America worms. I'm weirdly into bugs and these things sound like they're from space, so had to include them. Ice worms. Number 1, the Eldred Rock Lighthouse. We'll finish up with a haunted lighthouse. Not the most exciting, but I'm doing my best here. It's that or ice worms. Both are pretty thrilling, okay? What's creepier than an island full of shipwrecks? You tell me. The lighthouse, which was built in 1906, is located on a remote island in the Lynn Canal, and it was in operation until 1973. One of the most notorious shipwrecks was the Clara Nevada steamship. Now, in 1898, she smashed into Eldred Rock, burst into flames instantly before sinking into the icy depths, probably surrounded by ice worms. The disaster took 75 lives, and it's also believed that hundreds of pounds of gold were on board when this ship sank. So it was a curse. It was for sure cursed. All that gold, that many people died. I smell a curse. I know it. One of the most commonly reported ghost occurrences at the Eldrin Rock Lighthouse is the sighting of a ghostly woman, again, you guessed it, wearing all white. The classic Victorian gown. Legend has it the woman was a former lighthouse keeper's wife who died on the island and has remained there in spirit. Remained there. I guess she's stuck there for all of eternity, but we'll say she remained there. And if that's not enough for you, the lighthouse has been the subject of paranormal investigations. And some investigators have captured electronic voice phenomena. Yeah, they got EVPs on this island, so it's the real deal. That's how you know. Remind me to avoid this lighthouse at all costs. Great, cheers.
Coming in at number 5, the Basin Park Hotel. This hotel has long been the site of many paranormal sightings, although no one knows exactly why so many ghosts conjugate in this building. One belief is because the hotel possesses magical abilities due to the famous spring waters that it's built beside. During the 1800s, the indigenous people of the area talked about their holy springs, and it led many to believe that Eureka Springs had healing powers that could cure ailments and crippling conditions. Maybe these holy waters are what make the spirits more visible to the human eye today. Most famously, in room 307 lies the ghost of a cowboy who's been known to taunt the guests who stay there, waking them up in the middle of the night. Other entities that visitors claim to have witnessed are the young, translucent woman with steel blue eyes and cotton candy blonde hair, as well as a girl who runs around in pigtails and a yellow dress. Those that stay say they often see various orbs of light appearing around the grounds as if out of nowhere, and that objects will move all on their own very frequently. So if I were you, I'd just find a different hotel to stay at on your visit. Coming in at number 4, the King Opera House. While it's safe to assume you'd expect some kind of drama at the opera, usually it's left to the actors on stage. Said to be haunted by the ghost of a young actor named Charles Tolson, many believe they've seen the famous man roam the halls where he had his last performance ever. As the story goes, Tolson was a talented young man and owner of a traveling actors company that happened to be performing at the King Opera House for a week at the end of September in 1903. Tolson caught the eye of a young woman named Allie Parchman, who was just 17 but bored to death by her town and looking for adventure. But Allie's father got word that she intended to leave town with the young man and elope, and this made him furious. Her father ran down to the opera house to confront Tolson and kill him. When he arrived, he shot him 3 times, and although Tolson didn't die then, his life was over by the next day while in the hospital. Visitors of the opera house say they feel a strange sensation when they enter, like they're being watched constantly, and some even claim to have witnessed him lurking the halls in his Victorian cape and top hat. Next up at number 3, the Crescent Hotel and Spa. Not only is this Victorian beauty believed to be one of the most haunted places in Arkansas, but some have even said it might be one of the most haunted places in all of America. Before its time as a haunted hotel, it was a hospital run by a crooked doctor who fooled his cancer patients into thinking that there was a cure. So as you can imagine, it's riddled with spirits with a vengeance. Over the years, countless guests and staff have come forward telling their tales, claiming to have heard strange sensations, slamming doors, abrupt waking in the middle of the night, and even seeing full-bodied apparitions while staying in room 218. It is believed that the room is haunted by the ghost of Michael, who was a builder for the hotel that fell off the roof to his death back in 1885 and landed right in front of where room 218 sits. Others claim they've seen a middle-aged man with a white mustache sitting at the bar who vanishes out of sight. And in 1987, a guest said they saw a nurse pushing a gurney down the hallway in the middle of the night. But maybe most terrifying of all is room 202, where allegedly someone managed to photograph a ghost and prove its existence. Coming in at number 2, the Peel Mansion. Back in 1875, this mansion was built by a man named Samuel Peel. He was a US congressman and he lived in the home with his daughter Minnie. Both Peel and Minnie are said to haunt the house today, roaming the halls dressed in white, and often Minnie will play the piano if no one is in the room. But despite being the people the mansion is named after, they might not be the creepiest ghosts to haunt its halls. After the Peel family sold the mansion, a couple named Mr. and Mrs. English moved in with their family. One of their daughters, Marjorie, however, became very ill, and after discovering that she'd suffered from a burst appendix, a surgeon informed the family that she was not going to make it. After 10 days, Marjorie died and they covered her body in a sheet. But creepily, only a few hours after being pronounced dead, someone saw the sheet move. Marjorie was alive and went on to live for many more healthy years. But this troubled some of the staff on the farm, who believed that her spirit hadn't gotten back into her body and was somehow trapped under that sheet that others had seen moving. Years went by and Marjorie went back to her childhood home, only to find that the room where people thought she had died was closed off. When she asked why, she was told it was haunted by a little girl. But the question was, is it Minnie or somehow the lost spirit from Marjorie's almost death? And last up in our number 1 spot, Highway 365. The legend began back in 1973 when a man picked up a girl on a bridge in the night. She was covered in bruises and cuts and looked very scared. She told the man that she had been in a car accident and asked if he could drive her home. The man complied, and when they got to the house she said was hers, she suddenly vanished from his car. Too stunned to realize what he'd just witnessed, the man went up to the door of the house anyway. The door was answered by the girl's father, who said that she had just died on that very bridge last month. But he wasn't the only one to see the girl in white, as she became known. The next year, a different man picked up a young woman on a bridge and drove her home. When they arrived, she asked if he could knock on the door since the house was dark. But when the door opened, the girl was gone, and the mother explained that her daughter had died 1 year earlier that same night. Finally, another year went by, and another man picked up the same girl dressed in white near a bridge in the rain. He offered her his coat to keep her warm, and when they got to her house, she vanished along with his coat. After talking with the dead girl's parent, who said she visits every year on the anniversary of her death, he went to visit the girl's headstone only to find his missing coat draped across it.
And at number 5, we have the Huelma building in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Today, the Huelma building stands, but it's the site of a very tragic incident which took place in 1974. One of the deadliest high-rise fires in history. It was a morning like any other until an air conditioner on the 12th floor short-circuited, engulfing the entire floor in flames, which quickly spread to the rest of the building. Within 20 minutes, the entire building was on fire. Firemen rushed to the scene, but tragically, their ladders could only reach the 15th floor, so everyone above all burnt to death in the flames. And when the dust settled, it was determined that an estimated 179 people lost their lives. While making their way through the torched building, authorities found 13 bodies trapped in the elevator. They had been burnt so badly that they were completely unrecognizable and were never identified. Their bodies were buried in the São Pedro Cemetery, and some tell stories of hearing moans and cries of agony coming from their unmarked graves. Number 4, Paso Alberti stations in Buenos Aires. The A line in Buenos Aires is the oldest subway in Latin America, completed in 1913. Building the line was a massive undertaking that tragically claimed the lives of many workers there, including Salvador Vaca and Antonio Salas, were Italian immigrants whose deaths were initially hidden as accidents, but later revealed to be due to pure negligence. Some think that their spirits, along with others who met their ends during the construction, wander through the tracks at night. Some have reported hearing footsteps and catching glimpses of these ghoulish faces passing by the windows as the train speeds down the tunnels. People claim to see white translucent figures in the dark tunnels of these abandoned tracks, and some workers have even witnessed security cameras mysteriously turning off at night only to capture this eerie white figure when turned back on. Phantom Bride in her white gown is said to kind of roam the tunnels, and it leads to speculation that maybe she was abandoned at the altar or met a tragic fate on her wedding day, perhaps throwing herself onto the tracks. Who knows? Number 3, we have the Castillo San Cristobal in San Juan, Puerto Rico. This one has something of a tragic love story behind it. That's exactly what it is. This military base was built by the Spanish during the Inquisition. The executioner at the base had a daughter, Maria Dolores, who ended up falling in love with a thief named Bentoncourt. Bentoncourt was eventually arrested for his crimes and sentenced to death, and who executed the man? Maria's very own father, of course. And Maria was unaware of her lover's death until she discovered his remains in the gallows one day. She was so heartbroken and devastated that she ended up taking her own life right there and then. It's said that the lover's spirits still haunt this former military base till this very day. And coming in at our number 2 spot, I'm sure you've all heard of this one, the Island of Dolls in Mexico City. And yes, Mexico, not technically South America, right? But it's close. Plus, is there anything more unsettling to look at than a doll? Maybe multiple dolls. Now hang them all from trees in a forest. No surprise why this is one of the most famous creepy locations on the planet. The Island of Dolls in Mexico City's Xochimilco canals, it's a pretty eerie sight. It's covered with dolls hanging from trees and scattered about. It's their dead eyes and messed up faces. Story goes that a man named Don Julian Santana Barrera started hanging the dolls in order to appease the spirit of a drowned girl they found in the canal. Lots of people think that the island is now haunted. They say the dolls move their heads, whisper, and make spooky sounds. The Island of Dolls has become quite a tourist attraction. Some say the place feels like you're being watched by these ghostly forces. And finally, we have the Casa Matusita. Lima's Casa Matusita is a haunted residence that instills fear in people for a pretty good reason. It's got some dark history that dates back to Peru's colonial period, when a woman of Persian descent became its first notable resident. Accused of witchcraft during the Spanish Inquisition, she was sentenced to death and cursed the land before burning at the stake. And so things only got worse when a wealthy and cruel landlord built a large home on this cursed plot of land. He mistreated his staff, and he unknowingly pushed them to seek revenge during a high-profile dinner party. The staff spiked guests' drinks with hallucinogenic, but their prank kind of backfired tragically when the guests started brutally massacring each other. Decades later, the Matusita family moved in, setting up a business on the first floor, and a violent incident occurred when Mr. Matusita discovered his wife in bed with another dude, causing the man to snap, take the life of his wife, her lover, and finally himself. At our number 5 spot is Pico de Orizaba. Pico de Orizaba in Mexico. It's volcano time. This is North America's highest volcano. It's a majestic stratovolcano situated on the border between the Mexican states of Puebla and Veracruz. As the highest peak in Mexico and the 3rd highest in North America, reaching an elevation of about 18,491 feet, Pico de Orizaba is a challenging but, as you can imagine, awe-inspiring destination. Ascending it is a serious undertaking that requires proper prep and mountaineering skills. The climb is not to be taken lightly. The altitude, the unpredictable weather, the technical challenges, it all makes for a formidable expedition. So here are some things to consider. The high altitude poses a risk of altitude sickness. Climatization is crucial, and climbers often spend time at base camps to adjust before attempting to climb further. The ascent involves traversing glaciers, so climbers need to navigate crevices and seracs. Conditions can change rapidly. Snowstorms, high winds, and low temperatures are common. And because of the technical nature of the climb, a lot of climbers opt to hire experienced guides familiar with the mountain. Reaching the summit must be incredibly rewarding though, with panoramic views of the Mexican landscape. Number 4, the Danakil Depression in Ethiopia. This is one of the strangest looking places on the planet. Looking at images of it, it doesn't even look like a place you'd see on Earth. It's incredibly cool looking, but this area is known for its extreme heat, active volcanoes, and acidic hot springs. It's one of the hottest and most hostile places on Earth. But again, I mean, look at it. Seeing it in person would be pretty incredible. You need to be accompanied by a guide as the ground is unstable, and seeing as there are acidic hot springs everywhere, slipping and falling could and has meant death for some of the unfortunate folks who have gone there. And again, the heat is extreme, with temperatures often going above 50 degrees Celsius or 122 degrees Fahrenheit. So aside from all the other dangerous stuff you gotta deal with, heat stroke is also something you gotta keep in mind. Next up we have Half Dome in Yosemite National Park, USA. This is a very famous hike and a very iconic mountain, but there's an inherent danger to the climb. There have been multiple deaths and hundreds of accidents and search and rescue missions associated with not just the Half Dome itself, but the trail leading up to it. Standing in an elevation of 8,839 feet, Half Dome is renowned for its distinctive shape and the famous cable route that leads to its summit. The most popular and challenging route to the top of Half Dome is the Half Dome cable route. This is a steep and exposed climb up the dome's smooth granite surface. These cables provide a handhold for the final 400 feet of the summit. Weather conditions in Yosemite can vary, and the hike is best attempted during the summer months, but even in summer, weather changes can occur. So you gotta be prepared for sudden temperature drops, thunderstorms, and high winds. At number 2, we have Matterhorn. Since the first documented ascent of this mountain in 1865, over 500 people have died attempting to climb it. It's a challenging peak to climb with unpredictable weather and technical difficulties, and as the mountain has gained popularity as a tourist attraction, it's also led to overeager climbers without proper experience attempting the ascent. This mountain stands on the border of Switzerland and Italy. It's an iconic pyramid-shaped mountain that draws adventurers from around the globe. The elevation of the mountain, reaching 14,692 feet, means there's of course altitude-related challenges. Again, mountain sickness or AMS is a genuine concern. The dramatic changes in weather conditions can further complicate the climb with sudden storms, high winds, and freezing temperatures. The Matterhorn has a notorious history of accidents, with its steep faces and unpredictable weather contributing to its reputation as a pretty dangerous climb. Finally, at number 1, we have Pripyat, Ukraine. We're moving away from the thrill of heights and into the thrill of radiation contamination. Pripyat, Ukraine is a haunting reminder of the Chernobyl nuclear disaster of 1986. It was once a bustling Soviet city, but now stands as an eerie ghost town within the Chernobyl exclusion zone, frozen in time. It was built in 1970 to accommodate the workers of the nearby Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Pripyat quickly grew into a vibrant town, complete with modern amenities and a population of around 50,000, but 86 was a bad year. Reactor 4 of the Chernobyl plant exploded, releasing a catastrophic amount of radioactive material. Pripyat was abruptly evacuated, with residents leaving behind personal belongings, furniture, pretty much everything but the clothes on their back, really. So today, the city is this empty time capsule, nothing but decaying buildings, an abandoned amusement park, and mutated animals. And I'm not making that up. There are documented cases of really strange animals roaming around. Pripyat has become a destination for folks interested in dark tourism. The area is still contaminated, so guided tours adhere to strict safety measures to minimize exposure. Finally, Hungerford Castle was built by Sir Thomas Hungerford and was later expanded by his descendants. The castle served as a family residence and fortress over the centuries, but by the 17th century, it began to fall into disrepair. The castle was abandoned in the late 18th century and now stands mostly abandoned. It is open for tours and visits, but no one actually lives there. Now, on top of the ghost stuff, which I'll get into, there are some pretty spooky things to see at this place. For one, there's the crypt, which houses a bunch of human-shaped lead coffins, and inside these coffins are the embalmed remains of members of the Hungerford family, as if an old abandoned castle wasn't spooky enough already. The castle is also said to be haunted by the spirit of a monk. The monk was killed in the castle's chapel, and visitors will report seeing his ghostly figure up there dressed in a habit, and some have claimed to hear chanting or footsteps in the empty halls. It's also said that a member of the family who was betrayed and killed haunts the castle grounds. This ghost is often described as a shadowy figure that appears suddenly and then disappears just as quickly.
Loftus Hall, originally named Redmond Hall, is located in County Wexford, Ireland. It was built in 1350 by the Redmond family, and 300 years later it was purchased by the Loftus family. And in 1766, it became cursed. By that time, the Tottenham family had taken up residence in the castle. Also at that time, it was not uncommon for sailors to seek shelter in family homes during storms. So when a sailor knocked on the Tottenham family's door during a particularly bad stretch of weather, they welcomed him in with open arms. As the storm raged on, the sailor and the Tottenhams grew close. One night while playing cards together in the parlor room, Anne, one of the Tottenham's daughters, who by then had entered into somewhat of a relationship with the sailor, dropped a card underneath the table. She bent down to pick it up, and that's when she noticed the sailor's feet, which weren't actually feet at all, but instead hooves. This is when Anne realized that she had been courted by the devil. She began screaming, and her entire family watched in horror as the sailor transformed into a ball of fire and burst through the ceiling of the home. From that point on, the castle was dark, eerie, and often visited by malevolent spirits and demons. It got so bad that the family actually hired an exorcist, but unfortunately nothing changed. After the ordeal, Anne began sinking into madness, and eventually she was sent to an asylum where she was locked up for 19 years until her death. After she died, she is believed to have gone back to the castle, where she is said to roam to this day, just trying to make sense of it all. And some people have even claimed to have caught her ghost on camera. Take a look at this.
It just wouldn't be right talking about creepy castles without mentioning Huska Castle in the Czech Republic. So, built in the 13th century, this castle is known for its very unusual placement and purpose. Legend has it that the castle was constructed over a massive bottomless pit, which locals believed was a gateway to hell. This castle hadn't been built to house royalty or lords. It was there to block off the pit and keep whatever was down there from escaping, acting as a kind of barrier to keep the demonic forces contained. There are stories of soldiers who were lowered into the pit and came back utterly traumatized, claiming to have seen terrifying visions of hellish creatures. Some even believe that the walls of Huska Castle are still keeping those dark forces at bay. So that kind of goes with the title, Don't Go Here.
Carrigault Castle was built in 1480 in a small fishing village in County Clare, Ireland. At one point it was grand and vast. Today it's nothing but ruins. In fact, only one structure has been left standing. One structure that has been abandoned for the last 100 years and is completely off limits to visitors. Not because it's being refurbished into some kind of museum or anything, but because it's believed to be extremely haunted, so much so that it's actually been deemed dangerous. The portion of the castle left standing was once equipped with a killing hole that ran down from the upper levels of the castle down to the main entrance, allowing guards to drop things like fire and burning oil down on intruders. With so many people dying in the entryway of the castle, it's no wonder it's now said to be guarded by an incredibly powerful and an incredibly malevolent force or spirit, and when I say powerful, I mean it. The last person to enter the castle was an exorcist who went in to perform an exorcism in the 1920s, and he was literally scared to death by what he saw. Like, actually, the guy died of fear that very night. When his body was discovered the next day, the castle was sealed off for good. And you know what? I think it's best they keep it that way.
5. The Cursed Amethyst. The Cursed Amethyst is located at the Natural History Museum, but before it made its way there, it was owned by 19th century polymath Edward Huron Allen. The story surrounding the stone says that it was stolen from the temple of god Indra during the Indian Mutiny by Colonel W. Ferris, an officer of the Bengal Cavalry. After Ferris's death deteriorated and he died, the Cursed Amethyst was passed on to his son. Now, the curse of the gem was so strong that he eventually decided to have it stored away in a bank vault inside 7 locked boxes with a note of warning to anyone who dared handle it. Now, Edward also left strict instructions not to remove the amethyst until 33 years after his death. Now, after facing a string of health and financial misfortunes, Edward made several attempts to get rid of the stone, but they all proved unsuccessful, as each time it was returned to him. Then Less than a year after his death, though, his daughter donated the amethyst to the Natural History Museum, where it is on display in the vaults. Now, why she would ignore his instructions, I have no clue, but they were strict instructions, so I don't think any of us should get near that piece of amethyst. Number 4. The Unlucky Mummy. The unlucky mummy is an ancient Egyptian artifact in the collection of the British Museum in London. The identity of the original owner is unknown, but this painted wooden mummy board of an unidentified woman was acquired by the British Museum in 1889. Now, the unlucky mummy isn't actually a mummy, but the mummy board or coffin lid of a high-status woman who lived in around 950 to 900 BCE. Discovered in Thebes in the 1800s, the 4 young Englishmen who first purchased the mummy all died in unfortunate circumstances. The mummy board has acquired a reputation for bringing misfortune, as it has been credited with causing death in large-scale disasters such as the sinking of the RMS Titanic in 1912, thereby earning the nickname the Unlucky Mummy. Now, the Unlucky Mummy has also been linked to the death of British writer and journalist Bertram Fletcher Robinson. He conducted research into the history of the artifact whilst working as a journalist for the Daily Express newspaper during 1904. He became convinced that the Unlucky Mummy had malevolent powers and died just 3 years later at age 36. Now, with a nickname like that, I'd stay away from it too. Number 3. Begging Bowl. The Traveling Museum of the Paranormal and Occult has something of nightmares. They have a gilded money skull, often referred to as a begging bowl, that was once used by monks to appease angry spirits in Tibet. Skulls of all kinds, including human skulls, were often created as offering plates in which wine, bread, and often blood were offered to vengeful demons in order to drive them away from a holy place. This particular begging bowl belonged to a Chicago area man who recalled that his grandfather often fed the skull blood in order to perpetuate the family's good fortune. The family was careful to never forget the meals, because if they did, an angry entity would wreak havoc on their lives. Now, my question is, does the museum feed it? Are visitors allowed to feed it? I need answers, but I also never need to be in contact with that bowl, ever. Zak Bagans Museum. Zak Bagans has many haunted and cursed items in his possession, but one I really want to warn you about is Peggy the doll. Now, what's up with all these haunted, scary dolls? I hate it. Now, a warning, it said that if you look into this doll's eyes, it can cause you to have health issues or even get haunted. Now, Peggy is considered to be the most haunted and dangerous doll in the world. After being purchased at a car boot sale, the owner began having nightmares and felt as though she was being haunted by the doll. She contacted Jane Harris, a paranormal and haunted doll investigator, and eventually sent the doll to her. Jane and her team of psychics began working with the doll, running experiments or having paranormal sessions with it, and began posting photos and videos of the doll online. That is when she began receiving comments from people who had seen the video, and immediately after viewing it, began to have chest pain, nausea, and or crippling headaches. Peggy's picture alone is said to cause anxiety, heart attacks, and headaches. Peggy is treated with extreme respect in the museum. She has her own room, and a spirit box is linked up to the room so guests can interact with her if they so wish. And coming in at number 1 is the Scarab. The Smithsonian is home to many ancient Egyptian treasures and artifacts, and it's believed that these items are cursed. And I mean, with all the movies about Egyptian curses, this doesn't really surprise me. They have a scarab believed to be from King Tut. Now, if you don't know what that is, they were popular amulets and impression seals in ancient Egypt. There are many of them, and through their inscriptions and typology, they are an important source of information for archaeologists and historians of the ancient world. Now, it's said that bad luck will follow anyone who touches King Tut's body or anything in his tomb, and since these belong to him, I'd say watch out. In 1922, when King Tut's tomb itself was unearthed after more than 3,000 years of uninterrupted rest, some believe the pharaoh unleashed a powerful curse of death and destruction upon all who dared to disturb his eternal slumber. So, since this scarab belonged to him, it's believed to actually be cursed from King Tut himself, so I'd stay away. Well, coming in at number 5, Cahaba Ghost Town. It likely comes as no surprise that a ghost town is also home to thousands of unsettling spirits, but few are more terrifying than Cahaba. Once the capital city of Alabama, it was abandoned after the Civil War when terrible flooding led to most of the buildings falling into complete disrepair, and so the citizens who survived were forced to leave for good. Today, nothing remains but the ruins of what used to be, including a
church, a few cemeteries, and the Barker Mansion and its slave quarters. And I mean, that is just all the ingredients for a haunted ghost town if I've ever heard of one. Those that have tried to visit the once booming city recount that as soon as you enter the town's borders, cell service gets spotty and unreliable, only to be completely fine as soon as you step even 1 foot off the border of the town. While that alone might not scare visitors away, there are also countless reports of visitors witnessing terrifying apparitions and hearing the voices of the dead crying out at night for revenge. So visit at your own risk, but don't say I didn't warn you. Coming in at number 4 is the Boynton Oak. Of all the things that are usually haunted, like cemeteries, hospitals, churches, the last thing you'd likely expect to need to be afraid of was a tree. But trust me, this is no ordinary tree. The Boynton Oak is said to have grown from the grave of one Mr. Charles Boynton. As the legend goes, back in 1835, Charles was accused of friend Nathaniel Frost. Charles disputed the accusation and never once wavered from his alleged innocence. Still, he was found guilty for the crime and sentenced to execution as payback. But right before he was executed, he declared in front of everyone that a tree would spring forth from his grave as a proof of his innocence, and then they would all see that they had caught the wrong man. And shockingly, this is exactly what happened. Many claim that Charles's spirit haunts the tree above his grave, often freaking out those who come to visit. Even spookier is that some claim to have even seen him sitting under the tree waiting. But just who is he waiting for? No one knows exactly. Coming in at number 3 is Sloss Furnaces. Once built as a means to access iron ore, coal, and limestone, the Sloss Furnaces were far from a safe place to work. It's believed over the years at least 47 men lost their lives working at the furnaces due to the incredibly dangerous work conditions. But the most talked about is that of James Slag Wormwood, a former foreman of the furnaces known for being cruel to his employees and who died after slipping and falling into a pool of molten iron ore. Although there is rumor he may have been pushed by his workers, forced to the brink after his unending abuse. Still, after Wormwood's death, strange things started happening more and more frequently. Workers were seeing strange things, hearing strange noises, and started to feel like they were going crazy. Employees were being found injured or seen tripping and falling out of nowhere. Each of them recounted that an angry man covered in burns had tried to push them after screaming at them to get back to work. Then in 1971, a watchman encountered what he described as a half-man, half-demon who tried to push him up the stairs. After the watchman refused the spirit's advance, he was badly beaten by the entity until he fell unconscious. Later, while being examined, he was found to be covered in severe burns where he says he was beaten. So unless you're looking to be beaten up by an angry spirit and covered in burns from the blows, I might suggest a different place for your visit. Coming in at number 2 is Bear Creek Swamp. Even at the best of times, swamps give off spooky and creepy vibes, and this one might just be the worst of them all. Legend has it that many years ago, a woman's son went missing. Scared, the mother went looking for him in the nearby swamp, hoping that he had simply run away from home. But no matter how long she looked, she could never find him. It said she died in the swamp looking for him, and if you walk into the swamp today and say, "We have your baby," 3 times, she will come out of nowhere and attack you until you leave for good. And don't even try to come back after she's banished you. You might not be so lucky the second time around. And last up today in our number 1 spot is Sweetwater Mansion. Designed by war vet General John Brahan, this mansion was named after the nearby creek and first occupied by the general's son-in-law, Robert Patton. Under Patton's jurisdiction, the basement of the mansion served as a Civil War hospital and a county jail. And if that wasn't enough, it's said that at one point someone who lived in the mansion practiced dark magic, which thinned the veil between worlds. This would make sense considering just how many people have witnessed earth-shattering apparitions that sent them running for the hills. Most notably is the casket that contains a body of a Confederate soldier in one of the downstairs rooms that will suddenly disappear right in front of your eyes. It's believed that the casket is haunted by the spirit of original owner Robert Patton, whose funeral was held at the home and who was documented having an open casket ceremony. But that's not even the scariest part. There's a room on the property that routinely locks female female visitors inside. In fact, it happens so frequently that caretakers of the property have avoided entering it at all costs. And if a self-locking door and a terrifying soldier ghost don't turn you off of the property, there is also a secret room on the property with no door. The only way to enter is by a small window, and it's believed that anyone who goes in will never escape. So if I were you, I'd skip this one. Next up at number 5, the Bell Witch Cave. One of the most well-known haunted locations in all of Tennessee. The tales of it being haunted by an evil entity go as far back as the early 1800s and have been very well documented throughout the years. As the story goes, sometime in the late 16th century, there was a huge feud between two neighbors, John Bell and Kate Batts. Now, Kate believed that John had cheated her somehow on a land deal, and so to seek revenge would routinely torture his daughter. This of course made John act out, and the two spent most of their lives trying to get back at one another. In fact, she was so hell-bent on revenge that the feud even lasted until her very dying breath. On her deathbed, Kate, who was believed by all in the town to be a witch, allegedly cursed the entire Bell family and promised she would haunt them for the rest of eternity. Ever since that day, a terrifying entity is said to haunt the cave. Even Andrew Jackson, former president who spent a night there once, famously said, quote, "I would rather face the entire British Army than to spend another night with the Bell Witch." Those that visit the property today say they hear chains rattling or strange knocking sounds, but every single visitor leaves wishing they had never stepped foot inside. Coming in at number 4, the Congress Inn. While today the Congress Inn serves as an affordable option for an overnight stay in the city, during the Civil War it was used as a makeshift hospital. However, it's said that as the bodies needing a burial kept growing in numbers, doctors began running out of places to put them, and eventually were left with no other option than to cement the corpses into the walls. However, as it turns out, it is very hard for spirits to leave a property when their corpses are cemented into the walls, and these soldiers are rumored to be very angry about the way their corpses were dealt with, and so they take it out on the people who stay in the hotel. Visitors who've dared to stay a night claim to hear peculiar whispering from the walls, lights flickering, or loud footsteps in the hall even when they appear empty, as well as gunshots and the sounds of cannons in the night. All of which is terrifying, but whatever you do, stay away from room 102, as that is where the most terrifying apparition is said to reside. One man recounted his stay there, saying he woke in the middle of the night to find he was being pinned down by a horrifying spirit and was unable to move for what felt like an entire minute. However, as soon as he went to scream for help, the force suddenly lifted and disappeared back into the walls. Needless to say, the man packed his bags and looked for a new place to sleep for the night. And I would suggest the same for you. Next up at number 3 is the Fairview Plantation. Once the home of cruel and wealthy slave trader Isaac Franklin, it has long been believed that not only is this house haunted by the souls that were tortured here many years ago, but that anyone who resides in its walls will fall under a dark curse too. As legend has it, it all started when Franklin and his wife moved into the Fairview home, and after adding 4 new members to their family, each and everyone died before they became adults, and it's believed that each of their spirits haunts the grounds to this day. However, the curse didn't end there. Once Franklin passed and his wife remarried, the mansion was vacant for several years, until the Civil War Union soldiers sought it out to be used as a makeshift hospital. However, many are said to have perished within its walls, one of which was said to have written his will in a library book with his own blood, which just sounds like a recipe for a haunting if you ask me. From there, the property was sold several times, but no one stayed much longer than a few months, as they were inundated with supernatural entities and bad luck. One resident, Charles Reed, a horse breeder, lost 28 of his prize-winning horses when a lightning storm set fire to the barn, while others were haunted by Union soldiers crying in agony or covered in blood from brutal battles, or by the young spirits of the Franklin family crying out in the night. So even if ghosts don't scare you much, unless you're looking to fall under a century-old curse, I'd steer clear. Coming in at number 2, the Union Station Hotel. One day a woman was having a smoke out on the hotel's old platform and witnessed a strange woman wandering around in vintage clothing. But right before her eyes, she hopped over the rail and dropped into the tracks. The woman began to scream and cry out, believing she'd just witnessed someone jump to her death. But then, all of a sudden, the woman was gone. Next, she saw a man dressed as a soldier wandering the platform waiting for someone. But just as the girl had, he disappeared in a flash. Believed to be the ghosts from World War II, as the legend goes, a young woman named Abigail said goodbye to her beloved at this very station before he left for France. Abigail was deeply sad to see him go, but promised that she would wait for him and meet at this very spot once the war ended. Then, after the war, as promised, she went to the station and waited only to find out he had been killed in service. So, heartbroken, Abigail threw herself in front of a moving train to end her misery. It's believed that both ghosts are stuck in a loop, and that she takes her life only for him to arrive moments later. But sadly, they always miss each other. However, they aren't the only entities to haunt the hotel's walls. Guests that stay in room 711 often complain of lights flickering or stomping coming from the roof, despite that they are the top floor of the building. Some even say it sounds like heavy furniture is being dragged in the early hours of the morning. But the most frightening thing is when people are woken in the night by the blood-curdling scream of the woman who took her own life. And last up today in our number 1 spot, the Ryman Auditorium. This auditorium has long been the place of many incredible concerts and shows. However, despite its long-standing list of famous performers, it's also believed to be the most cursed building in all of Nashville. The auditorium opened its doors to the public way back in 1892, but it wasn't until around 1943 when rumors of its haunting began to surface. The reason behind the alleged curse of the building? Well, between 1943 to 1974, the auditorium became famous for hosting the Grand Ole Opry, a radio station turned stage show for up-and-coming country singers. But tragically, 37 performers died shortly after their performance at the auditorium, some facing their fate in car accidents or fires, while others were believed to be killed. Eventually, the Ole Opry found a new home, but still the curse remained, and an alleged other 14 acts died shortly after performing on the cursed stage. But it's not just the curse that should make you nervous to visit this building. It's also said to be haunted by Captain Thomas Ryman, who the building is named after. You see, contrary to his wishes, the space began taking on different kinds of acts, like plays and comedy shows, which has apparently angered the entity over the years, who had always wanted it to be a purely music-based venue. According to some patrons, Ryman's loud footsteps can be heard stomping across the stage when there's a performance he is particularly unfond of, and some have been so freaked out by his apparition that they left the theater entirely, never to return.
Next up, we have not just 1 or 2 or even 3, but the 7 gates of hell located in York County, Pennsylvania. They are, well, at least one, are legitimate physical gates located in the northwestern part of Pelham Township in the county in a wooded area off of Trout Run, which is a small body of water used as a nursery for young trout. But let's get back to the hot topic, hell. While no one knows the exact way in which the gates came to be, the most popular theory among locals is that they are the result of a failed mental institution on the grounds that existed hundreds of years ago. It is said that the patients staying there were incredibly troubled and horribly treated. And then one day a fire broke out in the asylum and it burnt to the ground along with the majority of the patients. Some escaped, but they might have wished they hadn't, because those who did and were found were beaten to death on the grounds. After the fire, the gates were put up by a local search party to trap any remaining patients of the asylum. Because of the atrocities that led to the gates' existence and the fire, they are now believed to be the 7 gates of hell. Only one can be seen during the day, but the other 6 become visible at night. It is believed that anyone who goes through the 5th gate will never be seen again, and that anyone who manages to go through all 7 will have a first-class express ticket right on down to hell.
Next up, we have Death Valley in Russia. If you were to come across certain parts of this place without knowing anything about it, you'd probably think hell was spewing up from the ground. Parts of the place look totally otherworldly. You can find the valley in the Kamchatka Peninsula, a remote, rugged region in the far east side of Russia. This valley, which is sometimes referred to as the Valley of Death, has earned its name because it's a place where animals and sometimes even people mysteriously drop dead. The main culprit here is toxic gases, so it's really not much of a mystery. The valley is situated near a bunch of active volcanoes, and these volcanoes release deadly gases like carbon dioxide and hydrogen sulfide. These gases can accumulate in low-lying areas of the valley, creating invisible but very lethal pockets of air. And the valley looks beautiful, great lush green scenery, but then there are all the animal carcasses scattered about. Animals that have come into the valley, stayed for too long, breathing in all this toxic gas, and then they drop dead. And scientists who have spent time here will often experience dizziness, nauseousness, or difficulty breathing when they wander into the wrong spots. In the worst cases, people have even been found dead.
Next on our list today, we have the entrance to the Mayan underworld, which is said to be in the Acton Tenakil Maknal mountain inside of a cave known as the Crystal Sepulchre, located in Belize. The Mayan version of hell is referred to as Xibalba, and it is believed to be a terrifying labyrinth filled with rivers of BLOOD along with large scorpions and, am I missing anything? Oh yeah, a crap ton of demons. Xibalba is ruled by 12 Lords of Death, with 2 being in charge of the realm, while the remaining 10 work in pairs to cause sickness, starvation, fear, destitution, pain, and untimely death to the Mayan population. While the cave entrance does look stunning, you might want to think twice before taking a step inside.
Next we head to Ireland with St. Patrick's Purgatory. There are a lot of myths and legends surrounding St. Patrick's Purgatory on Station Island. It's an ancient place of pilgrimage that dates back to the early Christian era. The story goes that St. Patrick, the patron saint of Ireland, received a vision from God revealing that Station Island was the entrance to Purgatory, a place where souls are purified before entering heaven. But some believe that this purgatory is actually a gateway to the other place, where sinners are condemned to eternal torment. During the Middle Ages, stories about the terrifying experiences of those who ventured into St. Patrick's Purgatory began to spread. Pilgrims claimed to have encountered demons during their spiritual journeys on the island, which was not what they were looking for. Today, St. Patrick's Purgatory is still a site of pilgrimage though, where for 3 days visitors come and sleep in dormitory rooms barefoot and pray at various sites on the island.
And finally, to finish off our list today, we have Lacus Curtius, yet another gateway to hell. That's why it's on this list, located in Rome, Italy. Now, whether you have or have not been to Rome, I would bet that the vast majority of you have no idea that located within the famous city is a pit called Lacus Curtius that is believed to be the one true gateway to hell. It is believed that in ancient times, in the place where the gateway lies, a chasm to hell opened up within the city. An oracle foretold of its opening and Rome's doom unless its citizens sacrificed what was dearest to the city down into the underworld. In a heroic act, a soldier named Marcus Curtius charged into the chasm after realizing that the most important thing to Rome was the Roman army. He saved the city and its people, and so even though he now rests in hell, he is regarded as one of the most selfless men to have ever lived. Alberta, Canada to Athens, Ohio. Another place you most definitely do not want to visit alone would have to be the Ridges, known at one point as the Athens Lunatic Asylum. It's not the best name I know, but that is what they called it. The asylum opened in 1874 and was home to hundreds of patients for many years until its closure in 1993. During its years of operation, the hospital, if you can call it that, was home to hundreds of patients, as I said, whose diagnoses range from jealousy and menstrual derangement all the way to dissociative identity disorder. The care at the facility was terrible and not really care at all. As many of us are well aware, mental health was incredibly misunderstood in the 20th century, and while advancements have been made, it's still pretty misunderstood to this day still. Anyways, patients at the asylum were often mentally and physically neglected and mistreated. And speaking of treatment, patients often underwent hydrotherapy, electroshock therapy, and many were even lobotomized, which would result in either death or extreme brain damage. One of the most famous deaths that took place on the ground was that of a 54-year-old female patient who had gone missing for 6 weeks, only to be found in an unused room of the asylum. When she was found, it became clear that she had taken off all of her clothes, folded them neatly, and then laid down on the floor to die. Her body left a stain that is still visible after all of these years. And it's been said that that woman, along with many of the other patients who died on the grounds, continue to heavily haunt the area to this day. Next up, we have the Tberry Asylum located in Philadelphia. Much like the Athens Asylum I just mentioned, this place was absolutely atrocious. After the doors opened in 1907, it quickly became overcrowded, with over 7,000 patients being confined to the property for a variety of severely misunderstood mental ailments. On the flip side, there were also some legit criminally insane patients too. So I guess you could say this place had range. But regardless of ailment or of the offense, all of the asylum patients were treated equally horribly. The hallways where many of the patients slept due to overcrowding were often lined with human feces and bodily fluids, and the staff were known to routinely mistreat those under their care. After the asylum shut down, the building became a hotspot for vandals, arsonists, and satanic cult gatherings. It was torn down in 2006, but the grounds to this day remain eerie, dark, dangerous, and most certainly somewhere you should not go alone. Next up, we have Shades of Death Road in New Jersey. The name comes from a combination of deaths caused by killer highwaymen and the deaths of the killer highwaymen after the townspeople in the area had finally had enough of their torment. Bludgeonings, decapitation, and projectile-related deaths are among those recorded in the area. Along with this, during the 1880s, the swamps surrounding the roadway were home to many malaria-riddled mosquitoes that caused many more deaths to occur in the area as well. Along with all of this, during the 1990s, a number of Polaroids were found scattered in the woods just off the road. Many depicted women laying on metal slabs. They appeared to be conscious but had no expression on their faces. To visit the area today would lead you to be met with a thick fog and the ghosts of the highwaymen. You might also experience bright lights attempting to run you off the road as you approach the scene of so many crimes, which is why it's on this list, and again, you should not go. Next, we have Zvikov Castle, located in the Czech Republic. At one time, an evil and malicious spirit is said to have roamed the halls of the castle, but apparently it disappeared in 1597. Despite this, hauntings and other paranormal events continue to take place on the grounds. Animals would often be seen displaying erratic behavior, and a woman whose life was ended at the hands of her own husband on the grounds could be seen mournfully roaming the halls with gaping holes where her eyes and nose used to be. I'm so sorry, that's really gross. The embalmed body of another young woman can also be found within the walls of the castle. So incredibly well preserved that many who visit claim that she still blinks her eyes. It has also been said that anyone who dares to sleep in the main tower of the castle will die within 12 months of doing so. So again, do not go, do not test this theory. I'm begging you guys, this is the disclaimer, this is the warning. Starting off our top 2 today, we have the Waitomo Caves Hotel, located in New Zealand. Those who have stayed at the hotel, built in 1908, have reported seeing BLOOD, sorry, you guys know I can't say it, dripping from the bathtubs, and have felt apparitions passing right through their bodies. Although the hotel shut down in early 2009, a group of ghost enthusiasts managed to talk their way into spending just one night in the hotel sometime later in that year, during which time they heard vicious screams and whimpering coming from a vent leading to an empty room where someone had been quite gruesomely killed many years ago. The group reported having been terrified and unable to sleep the entire night. I do not blame them. I hope I can sleep tonight. And finally, we have the Stanley Hotel, the inspiration behind The Shining, written by Stanley King. It has often been referred to as the most haunted hotel. However, I think that's pretty debatable considering that the Cecil exists, but that's a whole nother video. Anyways, while staying at the Stanley, King had a dream in which his son was being chased through the hallways by an endless string of horrors, which makes sense considering King and his family, who were the only ones staying at the hotel at the time, were staying in the most haunted room in the building, room 217. The room was haunted by a chambermaid, Elizabeth Wilson, who had been nearly killed in an explosion in the room so many years ago. When she did die in 1935, it appears as though her spirit went back to the room, and it has been widely accepted that she's haunted it and the hotel ever since.
Starting us off at number 10 is Louisiana Old State Capitol. This neo-Gothic cathedral-like castle was built back in 1846 after the Louisiana legislature decided to relocate the capital away from the sinful lifestyle scattered across New Orleans. For many years it housed some of the most esteemed and prestigious lobbyists and lawmakers, and although it's no longer used for politics, it is far from empty. Said to be haunted by numerous entities like a security guard and a girl who lived nearby during construction, the most notorious is that of Pierre Cuvion. Once a senator in the capital's prime, it said Pierre dropped dead from a heart attack in the building after a spirited speech about the corruption of politics. Visitors say his ghost still haunts the halls to this day, and he can often be heard stomping around the Senate floor or playing tricks on the staff. Once while making his nightly rounds, a security guard, an alive one to be clear, not the ghost, said he felt a tap of a cold finger on his shoulder, but when he turned around, nothing was there, but he knew he wasn't imagining it, as afterwards it sounded like something or someone was giggling. Most creepy of all is the numerous reports of staff saying they've seen motion detectors go off only to find an empty room upon inspection. So they would go back and check security tapes, but nothing had entered or left at the time the sensors were triggered. Coincidence? You tell me. Coming in at number 9, the Woodland Plantation. Owned by notorious pirate and seafarer William Johnson, during its active years it was used as a sugar plantation, housing and torturing a multitude of slaves. It likely comes as no surprise that Johnson was not revered as a kind man. Not only did he frequently kill for his job at sea, but he was notoriously cruel to his slaves too, with many reporting he would not bat an eye, executing or beating any who dared question his power or step out of line. Today, those brave enough to visit report hearing the cries of the tortured souls echo through the house, as well as lights turning on and off independently, and unexplainable bursts of cold air even in the blistering heat of summer. Most terrifying though is those that have witnessed the ghost of Pierre Lafleur, a man who briefly lived at the house after its days as a plantation, who after running out of money took to the chandelier in the living room and tragically ended his life. I will not be taking my chances with that one. Next up at number 8 is the USS Kidd. Maybe I just watched too much Pirates of the Caribbean as a kid, but there is something extra scary about a haunted ship. During World War II, this boat was a destroyer ship for the US Navy named after Admiral Isaac Kidd. Kidd tragically lost his life to the attack on Pearl Harbor, but surprisingly this isn't where the boat gets its ghost story from. On April 11th, 1945, a Japanese plane committed a attack, plummeting into the boat, killing 38 sailors and leaving 55 others badly wounded. Today it's no longer used as a warship, but remains docked in the Baton Rouge as a war memorial, and all that enter say they've felt spirits of the sailors who lost their lives inside. Visitors claim to see full-bodied apparitions of the spirits decked out in their war uniforms, as well as ghostly arms and legs creepily floating around, looking as if they were brutally ripped from the rest of the body. But whatever you do, just stay away from the sleeping quarters, as that's where things get even worse. Those that have ventured down say the blood-curdling screams of the soldiers can be heard bouncing off the walls, and some even say they've been pushed or grabbed by the tortured souls right up until they step foot off the ship. Coming in at number 7 is Chrétien Point. First run by Hippolyte Chrétien, a French colonist, Chrétien accrued a massive wealth operating his cotton plantation off the backs of slaves. On top of that, Chrétien also had some less than friendly friends, one of which was the famed pirate Jean Lafitte. One day, Chrétien's son, Hippolyte II, fell in love with the neighbor girl Felicity Nada. She was a fiery, passionate, and independent Spanish woman, and despite pushback from his father, father, Hippolyte married Felicity and the pair remained happily together. Once his father died, Hippolyte took over the family business, but sadly he died of yellow fever shortly after in 1839, leaving Felicity to keep things running. She took pride in this position and accrued even more wealth than her father-in-law or husband ever had, eventually even becoming friends with the pirate Jean Lafitte herself, just as her father-in-law had. But after Lafitte's death, his crew thought they could pull the wool over Felicity's eyes and steal from her beloved home. But they were no match for the widow. Upon the break-in, she shot a pistol right between the eyebrows of one of the pirates, sending the rest running for their lives. Eventually, Felicity died, but eternally devoted to her plantation, her spirit has never left. Visitors say you can still hear the deadly gunshot clear as day in the hall, as well as the sound of bodies tumbling down the stairs. Just be careful if you do decide to visit. Felicity does not always take kindly to visitors. Next up at number 6 is Labo Mansion. Once the plantation of a wealthy businessman in 1846, in 1905 the property was sold and converted into a hotel and casino. Now at the time, gambling was outlawed in New Orleans, but it became quite the popular hang spot during Prohibition. While patrons were likely pulled in by the promise of booze and gambling, it didn't take long before they realized the building was haunted by dozens of spirits. Partygoers often complained their watches immediately stopped working the minute they stepped foot on the property, only to magically be good as new once they left. Many claimed to hear strange noises echo through the halls, and others nearly fainted seeing the woman in white who sat on the upstairs porch. Then in 2013, a group of so-called paranormal investigators that by the sound of it were more like a group of drunken idiots, snuck onto the property looking to catch one of the many rumored entities said to haunt the historic halls. But having no real clue what they were doing, decided to light fire on the building in an attempt to provoke the spirits to show themselves. Sadly, all they did was burn it down. However, the fire was no match for the spirits. Even without the walls to hold them in, all the entities remain haunting the property. Those that walk by say their watches still stop working the minute they step foot on the property, and sometimes at night you can hear the cries of the terrifying woman in white. Next up at number 5 is Lloyd Hall Plantation. After leaving his London family for a new life in America, William Lloyd built his plantation in 1820. It's rumored that Lloyd was actually exiled from his family's insurance dynasty, hence his sudden move to America, but no one actually knows for sure. Like all plantations of the time, it was a cruel and brutal place for the slaves, but the owner was swimming in money and profit. That was, however, until the Civil War, when it was discovered that Lloyd was working as a double spy for both the Union and Confederacy. Once word got out, Union soldiers stormed his house and tarred and feathered him before he was hanged for his disloyalty. It's said Lloyd now haunts the house along with the many slaves that died while under his care. But that's not all. Others reported a Union soldier named Harry who was shot while hiding in the attic, as well as Lloyd's niece who, after being left at the altar, jumped out the second-story window to her death. Those brave enough to step on the property claimed to hear piano and violins despite no one playing, ringing doorbells when no one is outside, and see furniture moving around all on its own. Some say that if you listen carefully, you can still hear the screams of William Lloyd echo across the property. Coming in at number 4, Huma's House. By this point, I am sure you have put together that there were a lot of plantations in Louisiana during the early 1800s. Among that list is Huma's House. Said to be haunted by countless spirits of tortured souls from its time as a plantation, the ghosts that live here are sure to send you running for the hills. Among them are 16 souls said to be trapped inside oak trees across the property. All the souls trapped inside lost their lives during a dangerous construction project gone wrong. The trees were a cherished entity to the house, but workers cut down many of the historic oak trees before sending them down the river to be milled. There were 16 profiteers set off aboard the backs of the big tree trunks, but somehow their bodies were never recovered. It's said they remained trapped inside the trees as punishment, stuck on the property they tried to cheat. Among the haunted trees is a mysterious girl in a blue dress, often seen staring at visitors while she remains perched at the top of a staircase, but in the blink of an eye she'll disappear into thin air. And if a creepy girl apparition and Harry Potter trees don't scare you, then just wait until you feel the hand of a cold spirit grab your shoulder. You will never want to return as long as you live. Coming in at number 3, Taylortown Tower. Once a booming church amongst the community, shortly after its opening in 1906, membership began declining at a rapid rate, and soon the church became abandoned and used for hay storage for the nearby farmers. But how did it go from a church into a bell tower? Well, as the legend goes, a local plantation owner's daughter was engaged to be married, but on the day of her wedding, the groom couldn't go through with it and disappeared without a trace. The bride was absolutely devastated, and in a fit of depression ran to the nearby abandoned tower to end her suffering. It's said the bride jumped from the top of the tower to her death, and her father was so distraught when he happened upon her body that he burned the church down. In a cruel twist of fate, all that survived the flames was the very tower she had jumped from, taunting him until his dying day. Locals say that when there is a full moon, the bride can be seen wandering the land looking for her loved one, screaming and crying out after him. Next up at number 2 is the Bourbon Orleans Hotel. Back in the day, the Bourbon was a highly frequented theater and ballroom where wealthy Creole men could sneak away from their wives to secretly engage in erotic nighttime affairs. But all the fun came to a screeching halt in 1816 when a fire took out most of the building. Fast forward to 1881 and the building was put up for sale and purchased by a community of nuns. But after a brutal yellow fever epidemic struck Louisiana, many nuns and orphans' lives were lost, and that is where the ghost stories begin. Today the building operates as one of New Orleans' most luxurious hotels, but make no mistake, it is haunted by at least 20 different terrifying spirits. Guests have reported the sounds of laughter in the halls when no one was around, and some swear to have seen young people lying in beds with mists of black fog hanging over them. But most terrifying is the ghost who resides in room 644. Rumor has it that during its time as a monastery, a nun took her own life in this very room. Those that have stayed reported hearing blood-curdling screams from the room at all hours of the day, and any guests brave enough to sleep the night were awoken by the nun staring at them over the bed. So if you're looking to be haunted by a creepy nun on your vacation, be my guest, but I'll be looking for different accommodation. And last up today in our number 1 spot is La Pavilion Hotel. Just minutes away from the notorious French Quarter lies the luxurious Pavilion Hotel. But despite its lavish exterior, it is believed to be the home to over 100 spirits, and some paranormal investigators even believe the building sits on top of a portal to the other side. An interesting theory considering the building's less than ideal history. Although today the area is a tourist hotspot, back in the 19th century, the ground where La Pavilion sits was deemed completely inhospitable and incredibly dangerous. It was the frequent spot for foul deeds and late night killings, which is likely why so many spirits reside in the hotel's 4 walls. Among the most talked about are a couple seen dressed in beautiful clothing roaming around with googly eyes. The couple will enter an elevator, but then it never goes anywhere. Instead, the usual ping sound rings loudly, and the doors open up again, revealing no one inside. Many also claim to have witnessed a young woman on the 9th floor, reported to have died on the steps of the hotel. But the truly terrifying entity only reveals herself at night. One guest staying on the most notoriously haunted 9th floor said that in the middle of the night he was woken by a woman dressed in all black, sitting at the foot of his bed. He was speechless and terrified and went to scream, but the entity leaned in, ran her icy cold fingers through his hair, and said, quote, "You belong to me, I'll never let you go." Needless to say, he never returned, and I do not blame him. If I ever saw that lady in my room, I would be running as fast as I could. Well, there you have it, guys. I hope you liked this video today. My name's Kennedy. If you have any other haunted places, make sure to leave those in the comments below. I'd love to know what scary places you know about. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.
Want to see more videos like this one? Check out this video next. We found the most evil videos ever produced on the internet, and we compiled them into one big video for you guys. Check out the video now and find out now. What are you waiting for? Click the video now.